in his confession, he said that he murdered her. He said that he had the motive, he had the opportunity, and that he was trying to outsmart the police. And when they asked him, what is your motive? He said, she broke up with me. And then they said, what was your opportunity? He said, I knew how to get in her house. Why do your parents not ask you what you're arrested for? Because they already knew. And why do you already have a criminal defense attorney retained if you haven't done anything? Around that 135 time frame, around that 130 to 135 time frame is when we see that photograph of a guy that looks like Jeffrey Herbsman running away, right? So this neighbor says he hears the screaming around that time. They had Michael Jackson Bolanos footsteps of where he was at 1:30 a.m. He was way across. He was way across the city. He was down the street around several corners trying to climb a wall to get into a parking structure far away from the scene. So he goes to see if she's okay. He goes like this. He tries to check her neck. He realizes she's dead. He realizes he is a young black man who is a felon, who's out here doing something he has no business doing, who's just come across a dead white woman in front of him. He panics. He pulls out his phone. He thinks to call the police. Then he considers all of those things, puts his phone back, and is like, I should probably just get out of here because I ain't got no business being in this area.
Over here anyway. I shouldn't be over here any damn way.
Period. And he leaves. And he testified to that. And to me, that makes perfect sense. If you think about the way that black men specifically view the likelihood of success in the judicial system for themselves, that's how 99.99% of them are going to look at that situation. Fantastic tipping point for the defense was when finally Jeffrey Herbsman took the stand and everybody was like, what is this guy doing on trial? Why is this guy on trial right now when this guy, how did this guy, and he has immunity? How does this guy have immunity? Like, questions were going left and right at that point.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Iron Gavel. I'm Chris Washington, a personal injury and criminal defense attorney with over 17 years of courtroom experience. Every other Friday, we bring you gripping true stories of justice, strategy, and humanity from inside the courtroom. Today's story is one of a terrifying, heartbreaking miscarriage of justice. We literally have an innocent man rotting in prison. This is the case of Michael Jackson Bolanos, who was charged with first-degree murder, second-degree murder, home invasion, felony murder, and lying to a police officer. He was only found guilty of lying to a police officer, yet he's still rotting in prison. Today's guest is attorney Perna. I'm not going to try to pronounce her last name because I'm going to mess it up, but she's better known as My Detroit Lawyer. She took this case on where her client was facing life without parole for a murder he did not commit. However, he was still prosecuted, or should I say persecuted, for it, and is still sitting in prison. But before we unpack the courtroom drama, let's get to know the person behind the fight. So, My Detroit Lawyer, what inspired you to pursue a career in criminal defense?
Hey, thanks, Chris, for having me on. So yes, my name is Perna. I go by My Detroit Lawyer. The thing that made me want to pursue criminal defense is because when I was in law school, I actually ended up getting arrested a couple of times myself. So I went through the system and I basically saw how mistreated people are in the system. I also had a lot of friends that have went through the system. And so just during the course of law school, when I was trying to decide what type of law I wanted to practice, having experienced it myself and having had many people that were close to me have the same experiences, it really made me want to pursue that path. So that's basically what it was.
Where did you grow up and how did that help shape your views of justice?
So I was born in Detroit, and my family moved around a lot. So I've lived in many different places and then I ended up coming back to Detroit. But my view of justice growing up, I mean, I have immigrant parents for one thing. So it's very easy to get misunderstood in the system, and not only in the system, but just on a day-to-day basis. Like being a person of color, having parents who are immigrants, um I had a unique upbringing, being that we moved around so much, and maybe not unique to other people that have had those same experiences, but I think to the general population, it would have been a pretty unique experience growing up. So seeing the way that my parents were treated in certain circumstances, seeing the way that my brother was treated, knowing the way that I was treated, having those very personalized and individualized experiences of mistreatment, it really made me want to pursue trying to right wrongs that happen on a day-to-day basis, basically.
Oh, that's neat. Where did your parents immigrate from?
India.
India. Okay.
Yep.
Okay, sweet. So what are you most passionate about in your work?
I am most passionate about giving a voice to my clients. I think that that is the most important aspect of criminal defense. From the point in time that someone gets arrested, their words are twisted if they're allowed to speak, because most times they're not allowed to speak. They have a perspective of their story that happened, right? And they want to tell their point of view. And a lot of times, there are some lawyers that don't really care about their client's point of view. They care about just kind of going through the monotony of the work.
Well,
and I don't think
one thing I like to say is that one of the things we have to push back against is the longer we do this, the more you see people, lawyers, criminal defense lawyers, tend to become jaded and just lump everybody in. I mean, you can have a client who's legitimately innocent, and if you're jaded, you just treat them like just another one of these people who have done something wrong, then you're doing a disservice to an innocent man or woman. So yeah, I always say we have to continually recognize if we're becoming jaded like that and push back.
You know what? That is incredibly on point what you just said, because even I have seen so many lawyers. I've sat next to them in courtrooms where they've been more worried about hurrying up and getting through the process because they have a plane to catch for a vacation or something, and they just don't care about the details of what they're doing because they're just so worried about their own personal life. That's
right.
Not what this is about.
No, I can tell you a number of times I've had to postpone or cancel vacations, even miss some of my kids' sporting events especially if I'm in a trial, like, and then my kids understand, like, if I'm in trial, I'm not dad, like I'm unavailable to you.
Yep, absolutely.
So Michael Jackson Bolanos, if you were to give us a 30,000 foot overview of this case, what would you say?
A 30,000 foot overview gives me lots of space to be able to say lots of things. So, Michael Jackson Bolanos was he was charged with several crimes. Do you want me to just start at the very beginning and explain even who Samantha Wall is and how we even got here?
All of that. Just give it all to me.
Okay. So he was charged with the murder of Samantha Wall. Samantha Wall was the president of the largest synagogue of downtown Detroit, the Isaac Agree Synagogue in downtown Detroit. She was murdered on October 21st of 2023, which came right after October 7th of 2023, which was that big war, that Israel-Hamas thing that was going on. So it was originally assumed that her murder was based on some sort of anti-Semitism. And it very well still could be, but the only thing that we know after everything that happened was that Michael Jackson Bolanos did not murder Samantha Wall. That is what we do know. However, he was initially charged with her murder. Samantha Wall was found outside of her home, at her neighbor's home, actually, because she lived in a condo. So she was found murdered outside of her neighbor's house at about 6:30 a.m. in the morning. The reason that Michael Jackson Bolanos ended up being charged with this crime is because admittedly, he was out that night and he was trying to check car door handles to see whether cars were unlocked, to just go through cars, like petty theft type of things. So when the police were trying to review camera footage of the area, because her street alone did not have any camera footage, but the surrounding area, the FBI was involved, Michigan State Police was involved, Detroit Police was involved, and they started picking up camera footage from everywhere. And when they were picking up camera footage, they ended up finding a guy who was in the area and was attempting to open car door handles. They did geofencing and they ended up finding his cell phone number, which then tracked them to him. And then from there, they tracked the footage all the way back to the time he actually left his girlfriend's house that night. And they pieced together this entire video footage of what they claimed was him the entire time, but what we now know was not always him, because they were tracking the wrong person at some points in time, because I guess they thought all black people looked the same, because they clearly had the wrong guy at a certain point in time. And some of the footage was so grainy, they just put a little green circle around it and were just following something around. So needless to say, he ended up being charged with this crime. And ultimately, what the jury found, we went to trial for 5 weeks. The prosecution subpoenaed over 120 something witnesses. Like, I think it was even more than 120. I can't remember the exact number now, but it was a ridiculous amount of witnesses that they subpoenaed. They called, I want to say, nearly probably 80% of the people that they subpoenaed, they ended up calling to the stand. And it was a very rigorous trial. I was second chair to his trial. There was another attorney by the name of Brian Brown who was first chair for his trial. And we proceeded to trial for 5 weeks. Now, the really interesting point about this trial was that prior to Michael Jackson Bolanos even getting arrested and ultimately charged with this crime, Samantha Wall had an ex-boyfriend by the name of Jeffrey Herbsman. Jeffrey Herbsman was on his way to Kalamazoo one night after her murder and ended up going to Kalamazoo and calling 911 himself and admitting to murdering Samantha Wall. The police come to where he is. He was outside of his hotel room, and they come to where he is, and they obviously get him out of the car, and he gets on the ground, and he tells them that the knife that he murdered her with is underneath, or he said, the knife is under my front seat. They collect the knife, and they take Jeffrey Herbsman back to the Kalamazoo precinct to question him. And he had said, then he started saying, like, I think I murdered her. Then he's like, oh, I don't remember. He started like saying all these different things. But his very first original statement was, I killed her. That was what he had first said. There was an officer by the name of Allison Baker who even testified to that. It was on her body cam. That's what she remembered hearing him say, was that he killed her. And he said in his confession, he said that he murdered her. He said that he had the motive, he had the opportunity, and that he was trying to outsmart the police. And when they asked him, what is your motive? He said, she broke up with me. And then they said, what was your opportunity? He said, I knew how to get in her house. And they said, what do you mean by you're trying to outsmart people? And he just refused, like, he didn't answer that question thoroughly. But this was in the course of this confession. I don't even want to say with quotes. This is a confession that he gave. And then later on, when he gets to the police station and the police are questioning him, then he says he was having a panic attack, which he has also said at the scene. He said at the scene he was having a panic attack, but I don't consider that a panic attack. I think that was a guilt trip that he was having.
Right. That's what it sounds like to me.
Sounds like a guilty conscience. But the interesting point about his confession that he gave and the interview of him at the police station was when he gets to the police station and the police are asking him questions, they're treating him very nicely. They're not treating him like a person who just confessed to a murder. They're like giving him breathing techniques and asking him if he wants food and water and bathroom breaks and just like holding his hand.
Don't they do that? Well, don't they do that with all of your clients?
No, that's the best part. I was like, I've never seen this before. A person being a person calling of their own volition, saying that they committed a crime, and then their hand is being held through this entire thing. But he says at that point that he wants to call his lawyer, but he doesn't know his lawyer's, he doesn't know her number, and he couldn't really remember her name either. So he says he wants to call his parents to have his parents call his lawyer. So I'll come back to tell you all the things I found so interesting about this, but he calls his parents and he tells his parents, I'm at the Kalamazoo police station. Like, I've been arrested. And his parents simply say, okay, don't say anything. Don't say anything. First of all, what parents, actually not even parents, when somebody calls someone and says, I've just been arrested, when is your first question not for what?
That's right. They already knew.
That's exactly. They already knew. Because the second interesting thing was he has a lawyer. This guy has no criminal history. Why does he have a criminal defense attorney already? So his parents are then trying to get in touch with his criminal defense attorney for him. They're saying, don't say anything. We're going to call your lawyer. And they're trying to call his lawyer. Why do your parents not ask you what you're arrested for? Because they already knew. And why do you already have a criminal defense attorney retained if you haven't done anything? And if you're just having a panic attack right now and you're just falsely confessing to something you have not done. That's incredibly strange to me.
It's strange to me as well.
Okay. So then, long story short, they take him from Kalamazoo. They bring him back to Detroit. They detain him for 48 hours. He's released and he's never charged with anything. They said that they did a thorough investigation on this man, which during the course of trial, a slew of questions were asked to find out how thorough their investigation was. And their investigation was completely lacking in every sense of the word, completely lacking. He claimed that on the night of the murder that he was at the synagogue. Then he left the synagogue and came home at 8 p.m. and then stayed at his house at 8 p.m. until the following morning, where he ended up going for yoga and then going to Eastern Market, which is like this little area in downtown Detroit. The interesting part is his phone was put on airplane mode at 8:30 p.m. that night until the following morning at about 10 or 10:30 a.m., something around that time. That was never questioned. He was not questioned as to why his phone was in airplane mode. But it's not like his phone is constantly in airplane mode. Like, why would the police not ask him about that? That sounds really, I mean, she was murdered at night. So the fact that your phone just happened to be in airplane mode and you have no alibi, you have nothing to corroborate. You live by yourself. You have nothing to corroborate the fact that you were at home by yourself. That's very interesting. But the clothing that he was wearing that night, the police never tried to question what clothes he was wearing. They never tried to collect that clothing to try to test it for any DNA evidence. They never tested that knife that he said was underneath the front seat of his car. They never tried to test that knife.
That's what I wanted to ask you. Like, did they actually find a knife?
They did.
Wow.
They did.
And they did nothing with it.
They did not test it. They even said that there were hair fibers found on that knife, and they never tested the hair fibers. They simply collected them and never tested them. But with Michael Jackson Bolanos, and mind you, the knife that they found in Jeffrey Herbsman's car, he said that that knife was a seatbelt cutter. That's very interesting because the day that Michael Jackson Bolanos was arrested, which was much after Jeffrey Herbsman had given this confession, Michael Jackson Bolanos had been at a Airbnb that he owned. He owned it with somebody else, and that other person that he owned it with asked him to come and change the ring doorbell at the Airbnb. And when he got there, he was trying to use the Ring toolkit to try to pop the doorbell off to try to change the battery, and that wasn't giving him the leverage to pop it off. So he went back to his car where he kept a small little box cutter that he also used as a seatbelt cutter. He takes it out of his car, he goes back, he pops off the Ring doorbell, changes the battery, puts it in his coat pocket, gets in his car to go drive to the corner store where he wanted to grab a slice of pizza, and he gets arrested there. So then he gets brought into the police station, And then they're like, oh, you have a knife on you. Like, you didn't tell us you had a knife on you. First of all, you guys never asked him whether he had a knife. Like, you were supposed to pat him down. You didn't ask him if he had a knife. And then when they ask him about this knife, he told them, again, he has no idea about this whole Jeffrey Herbsman thing. He has no idea that any of this happened because he has no idea about anything that's going on. He did not murder Samantha Wall. He tells them, he's like, I use this as a seatbelt cutter. He was like, I drive fast in my car, and in the event I get into a car accident, I need something to cut my seatbelt with. And he was like, they're like, well, why is it in your pocket? He's like, because I was changing this Ring doorbell. Like, I took it out of my car to change this Ring doorbell. And at trial, the prosecutor didn't even try to. The prosecutor was basically was telling the jury, well, how convenient is it that this guy has this knife in his pocket and now he's calling it a seatbelt cutter? Jeffrey Herbsman did the exact same thing. He called that a seatbelt cutter. And his knife had like fibers and everything on it, and it was never tested. You guys didn't test anything for Jeffrey Herbsman. You just let him go. Let him go. But Michael Jackson Bolanos, they had the very moment that he walks out of his girlfriend's apartment that night, they took every step that he took downtown, every step that he took back home, everything.
So let me ask you,
go ahead.
Because this is a problem I've noticed, and most lawyers I talk to have noticed in the last 5 years, there are cameras everywhere in most cities. So what kind of camera footage did they have on of Michael?
So the camera footage they had was from like different buildings. It was like the building camera footage, like the security camera footage. And they had a lot of it. They really did. But again, he admitted to what he was doing. And I also believe the prosecution's theory of the timeline of events is incorrect. So the prosecution's theory is that Samantha Wall was murdered at 4:20 a.m. And the reason that they say that is because she had went to a wedding, and she had come back from this wedding at like 12 midnight or something like that. And so her ADT security, you can see like the door, like it gives a little notation that she opened her front door, right? But she never closed her front door. Then after being inside for a period of time, her back door opens and closes and opens and closes. And then there's movement because the ADT system has that motion sensor.
Right.
So it's detecting movement in her house. And then at 1:35 is around the last time that there's any movement in her house. I think it's like 1:35 or it's 1:35 is like the last movement in her house. And there's no more movement again. There's no more motion again until 4:20 a.m. where there's one motion in her house. So the ADT expert came and testified at trial, and his testimony was that the ADT thing in her house, it says motion at 4:20, then at 4:21 it goes into sleep mode, and then at 4:23 it goes into idle mode. So what that means is that, and he explained what the difference is. He says that sleep mode, if there's motion, it detects motion. Sleep mode, it won't go into sleep mode if there's continuous motion. It'll just stay in the motion thing. Sleep mode means there was one motion and now it's looking for motion. It's looking for motion, and it stays looking for motion for approximately 2 minutes. And then after 2 minutes of no motion, it then goes into idle mode where it basically rests until there is more motion. So that would mean, and then Michael Jackson Bolanos is found again on camera outside of Greektown Casino walking, very calmly just walking, and there's protesters and people outside. He's walking past people at 4:23 in the morning. So that would mean that, or it was actually like 4:22 and 23 seconds or something like that. But that would mean that he would have, or it was 4:23 and 13 seconds. I don't know. It's something within that time frame. It's been so long that I don't exactly remember. But for there to be one motion in her house has to be Samantha Wall leaving her own house, because there's only one motion. And according to the layout of her home, whoever came into the house to attack her, they got into a tussle in the kitchen because everything in the kitchen is like knocked over, or in the little nook sitting area is knocked over. She was stabbed on her couch because there's blood all over the couch. Then there's blood all throughout the hallway. There's puddles of blood, pools of blood in the hallway. So Michael Jackson Bolanos would have had to enter her home at 4:20 a.m., tussle with her everywhere, stab her 8 times in the back of the head and the neck, and she would have had to been stabbed all over her living room. Then she would have had to made it to the hallway where she laid there and bled out, and then he would have had to got out the house. She would have had to got out the house in 60 seconds because at 4:21 a.m. it goes into sleep mode where it's trying to detect motion.
Right.
There's no way that could have happened in 60 seconds because how did pools of blood get in that hallway? Pools of blood need time to accumulate into a pool. So it's more likely that she was killed around the 1:30 time for several reasons. Number one, there was a person that looks very much like Jeffrey Herbsman that is found running away from the scene at 1:35 a.m.
Wow.
It's a grainy footage, but we zoomed in on it and we put it next to a photograph of Jeffrey Herbsman at Kalamazoo, and it looks very much like Jeffrey Herbsman.
So let me ask you, they did geofencing of your client. First of all, what is geofencing?
So geofencing is the government's ability to section off an area, like a certain location, and then they can basically detect all of the active phone usage based on the cell phone towers in that area. So you'll get probably hundreds of thousands of hits, but you section off an area and you section it off for a specific date and a time range. And then any single cell phone that was in that area, as long as it was powered on and it was there, it will be pinging off of certain towers. So therefore, it will be fenced into that area and it has a geographical location that's detectable in that area.
And they were unable to do geofencing of Jeffrey Herbsman's phone because it was in airplane mode.
Or he didn't bring it. He left it in airplane mode and left it at his house. Because here's the thing. If you plan to go do a murder, isn't it like murder 101? Like, you don't take a phone with you.
That's
Everybody
right.
knows, like, phones are the first thing that people use to locate someone. If he was planning to go murder his girlfriend, I'm pretty sure that he was like, let me leave my phone at home. Like...
So let me ask you this question. Because
Sure.
this case has a lot going on. And I want to know, why is it important for the public to know about this case?
It is important for the public to know about this case because even at the point in time that they prosecuted Michael Jackson Bolanos for this, I strongly believe the prosecution did not even believe in their own case. I believe that they knew that they were going after the wrong person and they didn't care. And I think that that is a red flag for every single person living in America. If we live under a judicial system where prosecutors will actively pursue somebody that they truly don't believe is the culprit of a crime, and they will allow for, because let me also note for you, Jeffrey Herbsman was called as a witness from the prosecution, and he was given immunity to testify against Michael Jackson Bolanos at trial. That is ridiculous.
The guy, let me make sure the audience understands this. The ex-boyfriend who confessed to committing the murder was given immunity from prosecution for testifying against your client, who we know did not commit this murder.
That is correct. You understood that correctly.
Now, there was some Samantha Wall. She had some political connections, right?
Absolutely. Samantha Wall has very many political connections. Samantha Wall was incredibly politically affiliated. She was, her political position was such that she was associated with basically all of the politicians in Michigan, from Alyssa Slotkin, Rashida Tlaib, Dana Nessel. I mean, you name it. She was very, very politically affiliated. incredibly so. So there's just that aspect of it too. There's so many aspects of this case.
You know, honestly, politics should never come into the justice system. If our justice system can't maintain its integrity, then everything else is going to fall apart.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that is exactly what happened in this case. And I'm sorry, if I can just go back really quickly.
Go ahead.
Another reason that I believe that Samantha Wall was killed around the 1:30 a.m. time frame is because there was a neighbor who testified at trial. And the neighbor, the day after Samantha Wall was murdered, when the police were there investigating, the neighbor himself goes to the police and tells the police of his own volition, hey, last night I was outside. I had a dog. My dog had diarrhea. I took my dog out to go poop at like 1:30 in the morning, and I heard screams. I heard someone screaming, and I didn't know like what was going on, and I heard it, and I feel so bad. I feel so guilty that I didn't go and check on those screams, and I didn't call the police, and I didn't do anything, but I felt like those screams were coming from down there over where her place is, and I felt like she's got neighbors over there, and that should be their responsibility to take care of. And he's like, but I want you guys to know I heard screaming at 1:30 this morning, like I was out there around 1:30. And again, around that 1:35 time frame, around that 1:30 to 1:35 time frame is when we see that photograph of a guy that looks like Jeffrey Herbsman running away, right? So this neighbor says he hears the screaming around that time. They had Michael Jackson Bolanos footsteps of where he was at 1:30 a.m. He was way across. He was way across the city. He was down the street around several corners trying to climb a wall to get into a parking structure far away from the scene.
Wow.
The neighbor then comes back and testifies at trial saying, oh no, those weren't screams that I heard that night. I didn't hear screams. I didn't hear, like, I think I heard protesters outside. Sir, nobody forced you to say what you said when you said it the day after she was murdered. You now, which I believe, and Brian Brown did an excellent job of doing the cross-examination of this neighbor and got him to say, it was really that you had a guilty conscience. That same guilty conscience that you told the police about, you felt so guilty for not having done anything when you heard the screams of her being murdered that you've now tried to convince yourself that what you heard was not Samantha Wall being murdered because you feel bad about it.
Oh, that's great. What did he say? How did he respond to that question?
He was like, no, that I never said I felt guilty. I never said I felt guilty. We played him the body cam of him saying it to the officer. We played him his own body cam. He said it. He said he felt guilty and he felt callous because he didn't do anything when he heard those screams. So then now when he was on the stand, I mean, this guy was frazzled. He was upset. He was all the things that one can be. He was trying to backtrack and explain what he said. No, sir. There's no backtracking and explaining that. You said what you said because you heard what you heard. And I believe that she was murdered at 1:30 because that makes sense. The motion stopped at her house at 1:35. That makes sense. There was all of that motion and it stops at 1:35. Then the only other motion there is 4:20, which means from 1:35 to 4:20, she was laying in that hallway bleeding out, which is why there's pools of blood in that hallway. At 4:20, she comes to, she has a breath of life. She realizes she needs to get her ass outside to get help. She goes outside trying to get to her neighbor's house. Before she gets to her neighbor's house, she collapses and has her ultimate fall. And it was at that point that Michael Jackson Bolanos sees her outside, goes up to check on her to see whether she's okay, because even though he's out here doing petty crime, he's still a human being with general good emotions. Like, he's not a wicked person. So he goes to see if she's okay. He goes like this. He tries to check her neck. He realizes she's dead. He realizes he is a young black man who is a felon, who's out here doing something he has no business doing, who's just come across a dead white woman in front of him. He panics. He pulls out his phone. He thinks to call the police. Then he considers all of those things, puts his phone back, and is like, I should probably just get out of here because I ain't got no business being in this area.
Being over here anyway. I shouldn't be over here any damn way.
Period. And he leaves. And he testified to that. And to me, that makes perfect sense. If you think about the way that black men specifically view the likelihood of success in the judicial system for themselves, that's how 99.99% of them are going to look at that situation. They're going to. They're going to be like, yeah, this ain't looking too good for me. I should probably just go on ahead and keep it moving because this ain't got nothing to do with me. This ain't none of my business anyways. I have no business being here.
Tell me about Michael. I want to know his emotional state when you guys first met with him, or tell me how he found you. And Ryan, it's Ryan or Brian?
Brian.
Tell me how he found you and Brian, and what was his emotional state when you guys first encountered him.
Sure. So he had actually, I was out of the country when he got arrested for this crime. So he wasn't able to contact me directly at first. So he had contacted Brian because Brian had actually Brian was his court appointed attorney on a previous case. So he had already known Brian. So he ended up contacting Brian when he couldn't get a hold of me. So then when I came back into the country, I went to go visit him because he had called me and asked me to come see him. And he was telling me about this case. And I asked him to see his paperwork immediately. I'm like, let me see your paperwork. And I was reading through his paperwork, and he was he was nervous, right? He was like, I don't even know how I'm getting charged. He was like, I did not murder anyone, P. He's like, I'm not, like, I'm not a murderer. I did not murder anyone. I was like, okay, calm down. I'm like, let me look at the paperwork. Let's see what's going on. As soon as I saw in that paperwork, like, I already believed that Bolanos did not kill anyone. Okay. Like, I was already like, yeah, that's not possible. Like, whatever. But then when I saw the paperwork that confirmed that Jeffrey Herbsman had already made a confession to this, that's in the discovery, I was like, I really don't know why you're here now. Like, now I'm even more confused as to why it is that you are here. Like, this is ridiculous. So at that point, like I said, Brian was already retained. And I told him, I said, you're in good hands. Like, you have a great attorney. Like, Brian Brown is a great attorney. He's known for being a great attorney. You're good. And he's like, Brian's also very busy. Like, Brian's working a lot of cases. He was like, I want you to be on this case too. I want you two to work together for me. He was like, I need you to be a part of this too. And I was like, okay. Like, I was pretty much I was like, I think Brian can take care of this. Like, I think Brian's got it. But as far as trial preparation and, and going to trial and stuff like that, I do think that Brian and I made a really good team as far as like my organizational skills. And I'm very OCD about like putting together like trial files and trial binders and stuff. I'm incredibly OCD about it. So I think it played really well with Brian's ability to just off the top of his head cross-examine. And like, I don't do off the top of my head cross-examinations. I write out my questions and I might add questions in as I go to try to kind of keep me on a path. Brian is very much just off the top of his head. He'll just go, and he's very, very, very good. He's very good with just, I was very impressed with his off the top of his head cross-examination skills. He'll go.
Was this the first case y'all tried together?
Yes, I had known of Brian, but Brian and I did not know one another until Bolanos's case, where Bolanos put us together.
Well, I will say, I think with a case with 120 witnesses or so, it's probably a good idea to have more than one lawyer.
Yes. The trial prep alone, it took us, we prepared for this for hours upon hour. I couldn't even tell you the count of how many hundreds of hours it took. And then to be in trial for 5 weeks, every day when we got out of trial, we would meet back up and we would prep everything for the next day, prep again for the next day, prep again for, it was continuous. It was no sleep at all work. I
don't think people realize the level of stress we undergo when we're in trial. So it's 5 insane. Weeks, I want to know, how did you manage the stress, and did you gain weight, lose weight? What does trial do to your body? Because it does something to everybody's body, especially long trials.
I swear I barely ate. I barely slept. I was almost like too nervous to eat, and there was just so much going on, like nerves as far as like preparing. Like, I had to make sure we had everything, and everything was in order. Everything was ready to go, like ready to go. And I just did not have an appetite for like, even leading up to it, I had like no appetite. And when the jury was out deliberating, the jury deliberated for like a week and a half. And I was super nervous during deliberation. Just the intensity with which I could not do anything. I was not sleeping. I was not eating. I was like just all over the place.
So that's one of the things I do during trial. Actually, myself and my law partner is, we don't eat during the trial. We eat dinner day after the trial, but during the like from 8 a.m. until 6, whatever time we get out of court, I do not eat. One of the things, and I stumbled upon this. I actually think it's a really good idea. So I lost a bunch of weight doing intermittent fasting. And
Okay.
one of the things you experience when you're fasting is you experience amazing mental clarity.
Oh wow.
So I noticed, and my partner does as well, that we're much sharper during trial if we're not eating anything.
Oh, that's amazing. Okay, great tip, and I will take that. I need that. I got trials coming up. I'm about to be back-to-back trials
Yeah.
starting the 16th of June. So
I've had three. I had 3 murder trials this year, 2 in February and 1 in March, and I probably
Ooh.
lost about 10 pounds, but it was good weight loss because I knew I ate every night to give my body nourishment, but during the day, nothing, just
Wow.
water.
I was gonna say you gotta at least have the water. I know that I'm down waters during trial.
Oh yeah, you got it. And if you're not eating, you actually need to drink even more water. So I have a trial canteen. It's like a big gallon thing. I fill it up with ice. I only bring it to trials. If I'm not in trial, it just sits in the kitchen.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I'm gonna have to get one of those too.
Sweet. So 5 weeks, you guys. The trial itself was 5 weeks, so I would imagine the preparation was
Months.
yeah.
We started preparing, I think, like 2 months in advance. I mean, but they had terabytes of discovery that they were sending over to us. So we had separate hard drives just for the discovery. So I started prepping this as soon as I got the discovery on this. I got the discovery on this in January. So just going through the discovery alone was insane.
So
I
you
mean, they
got the
were
discovery in January, and the trial. What month was the trial in?
The trial was actually June 10th. It started June 10th of 2024.
And so hours every week for at least 5 months.
Yes. Yes.
Tell
And
me,
then,
what were
like,
some of your initial fears or doubts with respect to this case?
the racial disparity that we already know. I mean, Michael Jackson Bolanos, again, admittedly has a criminal past, right? His criminal past is very strictly car related. It's very strictly car related.
Petty
And
crime.
it is very unheard of. I won't say it never happens, but it's very rare that a person goes from a very specific type of crime and then jumps to murder all of a sudden. Like that generally does not happen. That's not a very common thing. All of his prior felonies were car related things, like stealing cars, going into cars. Like it was all very car related. So, but given the fact that he's a black man in America, that fear is always there that when you go to trial, you got to make sure that you're presenting I feel like you just got to work 5 times harder. When your client is a person of color, you got to work 5 times harder because you know the system is against them. You know that the general consensus in America and the way that black people or people of color are viewed in America is already under this negative light. So it just puts that much more pressure on you as the attorney to be like, all right, we have to knock this out the park. We ain't got no room to slip up. We got to knock this out the park. So that fear was there. The high publicity of this case was very publicly put out everywhere. It was internationally put out. The trial was live streamed overseas even because of who Samantha Wall was and her political affiliations. So that was a concern just because people like the way they were posting Michael Jackson Bolanos' face everywhere, and they were calling him the murderer, and they were like, oh, nobody gave him the benefit of the doubt, and nobody knew, like the media didn't know at that time this entire circumstance surrounding Jeffrey Herbsman. So that was a really pivotal point for us in trial when Jeffrey Herbsman took the stand and we had the ability to cross him. And again, Brian Brown did a phenomenal cross-examination of Jeffrey Herbsman. I mean, it was just jaw-dropping the way that cross went down. That was a pivotal point for us in trial because all of a sudden, the media perspective on this case started changing.
Oh, wow,
Now
that's great.
questions were being asked. Well, why wasn't the boyfriend looked into more? Why is Michael Jackson Bolanos on trial for murdering Samantha Wall when this guy admitted to the murder? All of a sudden, the narrative changed in the media, right? But
And I
leading
bet
up
it
to that,
changed in the jury room. Even though they're not supposed to deliberate before the judge gives them the case, we all know they go back there and they talk about the case.
for sure, right? And even the judge also, we know, gives that instruction: don't look up anything about this case, don't do any research. I would bet that jury did not follow. I mean, this case was everywhere.
They probably couldn't miss it. You go home, you watch the news, and it's going to pop up on the local news station. What are you talking about?
It's everywhere. It was all over the internet, all over the news. It was all over everywhere. But that was such a fantastic tipping point for the defense, was when finally Jeffrey Herbsman took the stand and everybody was like, what is this guy doing on trial? Why is this guy on trial right now when this guy, how did this guy, and he has immunity? How does this guy have immunity? Like, questions were going left and right at that point.
Everybody's completely confused, other than you guys who have all the facts.
Exactly.
So let's I know you guys had to put a lot of time into prepping. So I want to know, what was your strategy? How did you and Brian go about breaking down the state's case, and what was your theory of innocence, I would say?
Well, I will say that we knew undoubtedly that Michael Jackson Bolanos was innocent just based on the empirical evidence of the ADT system itself, right? It's humanly impossible for someone to commit what they are alleging is this murder under their time of events, right? Like 60 seconds to do all of that, and then to get to Greektown Casino and just be walking, and then walk past people. Because Michael Jackson Bolanos, like, the amount of blood that was in Samantha Wall's place, he would have been covered in blood. He would have been covered in blood. There was so much blood inside that apartment that if you just committed that murder, you would not be willingly walking around other people. You would be dipping and dodging into alleys and trying to find a way to avoid contact with people. He even walked past our district courthouse in downtown Detroit. Everybody knows that casinos and courthouses have cameras. He's just strolling on by, just walking on by. There's no way. You would not do that, right?
Not after committing a murder. Absolutely not.
Not after committing a murder. And you'd be out of your right mind. You'd be nervous. You'd be panicked. You'd be looking around. There was none of that. He was literally casually strolling around like, all right, whatever. Bloop, bloop, bloop. So we knew undoubtedly that we had an innocent man. Like, we knew he was innocent. We knew it. But it was just
something you said earlier that I want to touch on, and I tell people all the time, it is much more difficult to represent an innocent person than it is to represent a guilty one. Because if you lose, like, it's going to be on your conscience forever. I have one in my time as a lawyer. I have one guy who I truly believe, and I tell this story probably to a lot of the guests I talk about to on this podcast. But Ramad Serial was accused of armed robbery, and he allegedly went in this store with a ski mask covering here and here, so all you could see was his eyes. And it was a little Asian convenience store, and the lady said she recognized him because of his eyes. He was a black guy with brown eyes. I mean, how rare is that? Like, literally, that's probably 90% of African-American males have brown eyes. And there was so the robber jumped on the counter, placed his hands on a piece of plexiglass that was taken by the police afterwards because it had fingerprints and DNA. Well, the lead officer allegedly claims he lost the plexiglass. And, Ramad Serial...
You lost the DNA?
He lost the fingerprints and DNA. So in Louisiana, the judges don't have the right to dismiss the charges. All they can do is give us what's called an adverse inference. Like, we got to argue that this plexiglass would have proven it wasn't him. However, it was an all-white jury. I will never forget that. It was an all-white jury. Ramad wasn't no angel. Like he was, I think he had a prior conviction for drugs or a pending drug charge, something like that. And he's like, look, I did that, but I've never robbed anybody a day in my life. And to this day, I believe the guy. And he was found guilty, and I believe the judge gave him 35 years. Because armed robbery in Louisiana carries 15 to 99 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yep. And I believe at the end of the trial, the prosecutor did not believe Ramad Serial had committed that armed robbery. He never said that, but the look on his face, I believe he thought he convicted an innocent man.
And to me, you know, even though that sits on your conscience and feels bad to you, I always wonder, how does it feel to these prosecutors, though? You did this. Like, you took this all the way through to this point, and now you really have to live with that karma. Like, that karma is really bad karma. Like, I can't even imagine how to sleep at night with that. That's terrible to me. That's why, honestly, I could never be a judge. I could never be a prosecutor. Like, I'm doing exactly what I'm meant to do because I cannot be on the other side of that. I can't.
No, I don't think I could do it either.
I know I can't. Oh, man.
Let's go through the trial, because you've given us a lot, and I'll just kind of drop it in as we go.
Yeah, sure.
But let's start with jury selection. How does jury selection work in Michigan, and what was your strategy for jury selection?
So, jury selection, obviously we get the opportunity to voir dire, prosecution gets the opportunity to voir dire. What we had to do because of the media attention for this case, we got pools and pools. We got a super large jury pool. It was over like 100 people that we pulled at first, and everyone had to have a questionnaire, and they had to fill out the questionnaire before they could even, like, we were dismissing people just based off the questionnaire because we needed to know who already heard about this case and what did they hear about this case? What were the things that they believed based on what they heard about this case? And that alone got rid of a large amount of our jury pool because so many people had already heard about this case. So many people were saying either one way or another. There was a lot of people that were saying, we saw the photograph they put up of Michael Jackson Bolanos, and we don't believe he did it. Like, the guy, he just doesn't look like a murderer. There were a lot of other people. Yeah, there were people saying that just based off of what the news coverage was. They were like, we were seeing him on the news. We saw the motion hearings and this and that. We believe the guy's innocent. There were other people that were on the opposite side of the spectrum. They were like, he definitely murdered her. Like, he for sure is a murderer. So we were getting rid of people left and right just based off of what they knew, what they saw, how they felt. So that got rid of so many people. Jury selection, I believe, was like 2 days. We spent about 2 days on jury selection. I think at the end of the second day was when we finally impaneled our jury, and then we ended up doing openings. Like, we finished openings on day 2, and then we got right into the, if I remember correctly, I'm pretty sure that's how that went.
What was the makeup of the jury?
So our jury was, we actually had a pretty good breakdown of both Black and white people. I think we had, I'm trying to remember specifically. Honestly, I don't even really remember I don't remember what the numbers were for sure, but I do remember feeling pretty confident that we had a good enough amount of people of color on our jury. Although, because of the length of the trial, we did end up having jurors as the trial proceeded that were
fell off.
They fell off. They were getting dismissed for a variety of reasons. Like, one woman, I believe, like, had vertigo or something like that, and she said that she was feeling sick. And we were like 2 or 3 weeks into trial at that point. And we were like, damn, because she was. I remember she was a Black.
Damn, I like her, and she's gone now.
We were like, No, don't do this to us. And then we had another woman that had a vacation planned that she had never told us about at the time that we were impaneling this jury, because we told them. I mean, the judge told the jury, this is going to be an extremely long trial. We are expecting this trial to last over a month. So, you guys need to be in it for the long haul. So there was a lady that had to go because of a vacation. There was another lady that had to go because of like some childcare issues. She said that she couldn't keep affording like a babysitter to watch her kids. So a lot of that happened, but
why is it important to have a diverse demographic on the jury?
Because if you don't have a diverse demographic of jury members, then it's not truly a jury of your peers. Although it's never going to be a jury of your peers, because no defendant knows these people. Like, that's a conflict of interest. So I always find it interesting that they call it a jury of your peers. Like, whose peers are these? Like,
I don't know my peers. How do I not know my peers?
You know what I'm saying? Like, I find that to be the weirdest like statement to describe a jury, like a jury of your peers. Who are these people? They're not my peers. Like, I don't know who any of these people are. So, but just based on the way that, obviously we as human beings we do have a tendency to carry certain biases. And in order for us to be able to provide the safest defense and probably the strongest defense, having diversity amongst the people who are listening to the facts of the case is the most important thing. I truly believe jury selection is, if not the most important part of a trial, it's one of the most important parts of a trial.
I think it's the most important part. I like to tell people that if a person has a bias that's been ingrained in them from a very long time, you're not going to change that bias in jury selection. And if they sneak on the jury, you're going to have to live with it. But when you have a diverse group of jurors and they have to spend a significant amount of time together and deliberating, sometimes they are able to get the person to accept their bias and put it aside and render a verdict based on the facts and evidence. So Absolutely. We can't do it in jury. We can't get rid of all bias in jury selection as lawyers. I don't care who you are. But what we can do is, if we have a diverse demographics on our jury, those people, the 12 who deliberate, can go in the back, talk through their issues. Sometimes you hear them yelling from the courtroom, but at least they're going through the issues, and sometimes they will put their bias aside. I tell people, I'm never going to ask anybody to get rid of their bias, but if they can put it aside, maybe I keep them on the jury.
Yeah. I mean, again, to your point, that is 100% accurate. You cannot change someone's mind during the voir dire process. It's never going to happen. But maybe they can get them to think differently just for the sake of that, for the sake of the trial or whatever. But it's, I don't know. It's 100%.
I had a guy, this when I was much younger, this was my bias. So there was this old white guy. He was tall, thin. He had this full beard. And look, everything about him was the white guy I was taught to avoid growing up. And I realized it right away. Like, I wanted to strike him because of how he looked and nothing else. And everything this man said came off as he was completely authentic. He had served on a jury before, a death penalty case, voted for death. And despite all of that, like, all I got from him was really good energy. And so I kept him on the jury. He ended up being the foreman. My client was a young black guy accused of 3 counts of attempted second-degree murder. A hotel was shot up with a AK-47. And the client was found not guilty. This guy was my foreman. And I talked to him after the trial, and he was like, you know, I said, what led you guys to the verdict? What guided you? And he said, you know, in jury selection, I said this in jury selection. He said, in jury selection, one of the things you said is that we have to strip ourselves down almost naked to be fair and impartial. And he said that stuck with me. And we talked about that in the jury room. And I was like, wow, I will never allow my bias to cause me to exclude anybody absent some legitimate reason that occurs during that jury selection process.
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's an amazing, like, I actually really love that story. What a great story. I wish I had a comparable one, but I don't. I haven't, I don't know. I guess I've never really known. I've spoken to my jury almost every time, almost after every trial, but I don't know that I've had anyone that has been so strikingly different than what I thought, or at least they have voiced that to me. Like, I haven't been able to pick up on that so intuitively. So I don't know for sure, but that's a fantastic story though. Good share.
So let's go back. Michael Jackson Bolanos. I want to hear the prosecutor's opening statement and how you and Brian dealt with that opening statement in your own opening statement.
Man, the prosecutor's opening statement was along the lines of, usually at night people lock, I can't remember verbatim, but he was like, usually at night people lock their doors when they're, sleeping safely inside their home. And the reason that they do that is to keep away from people that are out prowling, like Michael Jackson Bolanos. Like, the prosecution attempted to paint him in such a poor light. They really tried to make him out to be something that he obviously is not. And they tried to make it sound like he was, they tried to press that premeditation thing. He was out there. He thought about this. He broke into her house. He broke into her house, even though, like, her door was open. He found it as an opportunity. He went into her house and attacked her, and she was surprised by someone being in her house. Like, all of these, the prosecution's opening statement went so far against the evidence that we knew they were going to be able to show, because they had absolutely no evidence of him being in the house. He never went in the house, period. He never stepped foot inside her house. They don't have any DNA. They don't have any fingerprints. They don't have a footprint. They don't have not one scintilla of evidence showing that he was in the house. They don't have a cell phone ping of him inside, because he never stepped foot in the house. If you didn't go in, there's not going to be evidence of you being in there. And we knew that they didn't have that. They did not have it. So he wasted his time giving this entire opening statement talking about how Michael Jackson Bolanos went inside of Samantha Wall's house. When I sat there and listened to that, and I was like, this has got to be the dumbest opening statement I've ever heard. Like, this guy is a complete idiot. Because the facts that are going to come out are never going to support what he's promising this jury that they're going to hear. They're never going to hear any of that. Like, that didn't happen. And there's not one fact in this case that's going to support what he's saying right now. He's lying to the jury off top.
He just made it up. He didn't have a good case, so he just made it up as he went along.
He just made it up. And I was like, that's very damaging to do. You're ruining your reputation in opening statement by promising that the jury is going to hear things that you know good and hell well they're never going to hear, because it never happened. That's crazy to me. And I get that that's your job, but, like, you could have framed it I don't know how you could have framed it, because I would never do your job for you. So I have no idea how you do that, but that was terrible. That was terrible, in my opinion.
Well, I always tell people that prosecutors and defense attorneys have different jobs. Like, our job is to defend our clients no matter what. Now, we don't get to lie for our clients or make stuff up or create evidence, but our job is to defend them, stand by them through the entirety of the case. The prosecutor's job is actually a little different. They represent the public, the state. Their job is to prosecute people who they legitimately believe are guilty of a crime. But if they believe the person is not guilty of the crime, they also have a duty to dismiss the charge. Now, how often does this happen? Not often enough, but that is their duty. Our clients are members of the public also, and if you believe my guy is innocent, you're supposed to dismiss his case.
Yes. I agree with you. Frivolous prosecution. It happens so often. It happens so often. Even in this case, there was evidence screaming that Michael Jackson Bolanos is innocent. And yet, and still, we had to sit through. I was like, this is a joke. And honestly, the other interesting part about it was when Brian and I were going through all of the discovery on this case and all of the people, like the civilian witnesses that the police interviewed, there was honestly, outside of Jeffrey Herbsman, who I still believe murdered Samantha Wall, outside of Jeffrey Herbsman, there was so many other people that fit the bill. We were like, it could be this person. It could be that person. It could be this person. Like, the only person it couldn't be was Michael Jackson Bolanos. I'm like, that's the only person it's definitely not. But it could literally be all of these other people. Like, she kept a very interesting cast of characters as her friends. They were all very questionable people. We were like, why would this person say this? Like, she had also dated this other guy named Aaron Pergament, who was friends with her parents, who her sister referred to as a stalker. When her sister was interviewed by the police, her sister was like, you need to check out this guy, Aaron Pergament. He's a stalker. He's been stalking my sister. He shows up to her house unannounced. He has opened her door before, like all sorts of things. Like it could have been Aaron Pergament. It could have been, there was another guy named Brett Foreman. Brett Foreman had a conversation with a woman named Lydia Bates, and Lydia Bates ended up telling the police she felt uncomfortable about the conversation she had with Brett Foreman because Brett Foreman gave her an entire hypothetical about how he would have killed Samantha Wall if he was the murderer. He would have parked his car at a movie theater. He would have used his credit card to buy a movie ticket. He would have left his cell phone in the car. Like, who says these things? Like, your friend was just murdered and you're going to, like, we're like, it could be Brett Foreman. It could be, there was such a slew of people it could have been. We were like, how the hell did these people get to Michael Jackson Bolanos? Just because he was in the area? That was enough? Just he was in the, all of these people are so questionable. So questionable.
Well, he was in the area. Let me ask you this. Was he the only black guy in the area of all these people in her circle?
Yes. He was the only black person at the entire trial. I mean, outside of officers, of civilian witnesses, he was the only black person that took the stand as a civilian witness, even though he took it in his own defense. Like, yeah, this is ridiculous. Ridiculous.
So tell me about your guys' opening statement.
Brian's opening statement was amazing, and it was very, very to the point. It was very good. It was very much just, listen, you're not going to see any evidence of him being in this house because he was never in this house. You're not going to see any evidence of him having even known Samantha Wall because he didn't know her. You're not going to hear any, but you are going to hear evidence of Jeffrey Herbsman. You're going to hear about this guy. You're going to hear about another guy who confessed to the murder. You're going to hear about that. So we'll get to that when we get to it. He did an excellent job of laying out all the ways in which the prosecution was not going to be able to meet their burden in a non-argumentative, very, this is what the facts are going to show kind of way. He did a phenomenal job, and it very much stood tall against the prosecutor's opening statement. And I remember Brian telling me afterwards that he was not happy with his opening statement. He was like, oh, I wasn't happy with it. Like, I wish I would have done this or done that. And I was like, I was actually very happy with it. I'm like, you basically stood tall against what they said. And we know that the facts are not going to be able to show what they're claiming that the facts are going to show. They're never going to show that. We know the facts. I was like, you did a great job of laying it out. And of course, go ahead.
That's true for all of us, though. Like, when I do an opening statement or closing argument, I never write it down. I tell people connecting with the jury is more important than getting the script right. So I'll have bullet points, but I'm not reading anything. And inevitably, in every argument I make, I always sit down saying, damn it, I should have said this. It slipped my mind.
Me too. I do it every time too. But even, with the amount of information that there was, like, I can't stress enough how much discovery there was on this case and how many minute details there were to remember about this case. So for Brian to be able to do that opening just off the top of his head like that was phenomenal. I was very impressed. It was very phenomenal. Like he did a very great job. And even in closing, he did a fantastic job. Like closing was something that we definitely worked on. I'm sure he probably thought about an opening because I remember like he ran an opening by me a couple different ways or whatever, but closing was something we really, really put a lot of preparation into because we had PowerPoint slides and because the amount of information there was to remind the jury about in closing was insane. It was a tremendous, I think closing was nearly 2 hours. Like it took him nearly 2 hours to close.
Oh, wow.
But aside from the PowerPoints, I mean, he did that all off the top of his head.
So,
Very impressive.
so I want to go to some of the witnesses that testified. I know that was 100, so I don't even expect you to remember them all. But
Yeah.
if you could tell me the names of who some of the very important witnesses were for the prosecution, and then we'll go through each one of them's testimony.
Yeah, sure. So, the neighbor guy was important for them. Or well, I think that was more important for us. They claimed it was important for them based on what he had said first. What was that neighbor guy's name? Man, I had a little Instagram thing I had made. Like I made a little YouTube things of these people. I can't remember that guy's name. There was I would say the main important people for the prosecution was Detective Sarah Markle, who was the cell phone analyst. Um, Stephen Ford, who was one of the arresting officers, a homicide detective. Patrick Lane, another homicide detective. Lance Sullivan was an FBI investigator. The original OIC was this woman who was pregnant and then she had just had her baby and then she whatever her name was, it's slipping my mind right now. She was incredibly important. Her testimony was ridiculous. She was a ridiculous individual. Um,
In a good way for you guys or in a bad way?
in a good way for us. She was ridiculous for the prosecution. I mean, she was a joke. I was like, I don't even know who is this woman. Who gave her a job? Then there was the OIC who ended up taking the case.
Let me ask you this: do you remember the substance of his testimony?
Yes,
Don't worry about his name. You the names. I made a list. We'll go through. My editor.
Okay.
I'll let you send me the names later, and my editor will drop them in as we talk about them.
Okay. Okay.
So, any more witnesses you think for the state that we need to know about?
Yeah, there was another guy, Chad something, who made this video that was ridiculous for the state too. That guy, they thought they had that one in the bag with that. That was the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen. I can't remember his last name either. I'll get you those names. I'm sorry. I should have.
Oh no, you're fine. You're fine.
But yeah, these were, I would say, like the most important people. Oh, well, yeah, that was for us. So their medical examiner, whose name I don't remember, they had a blood spatter analyst who was great for us. I don't know what she was supposed to be giving for them. Like she did a phenomenal job for the defense, even though she was called by the state, obviously, because she works for Michigan State Police. Their medical examiner was a joke. That was a complete joke of testimony. They did so many things that were their testimony that they elicited was very much comical. They had a couple officers who were having this. Oh, there was a guy by the name of Q, something like Officer Q and Officer Dowd. I think Dowd was okay. Q was hilarious. He got into this back and forth with Brian that was so funny. It was just the funniest thing in the world. Turned out really bad for the prosecution.
So Officer Q and Officer Dodd. Did you say
Yeah.
Dodd?
Yep. I think Dowd was actually okay. Like he wasn't bad for either one. He just kind of stuck to the facts. Officer Q was hilarious though. That guy did not know what was going on. He had no idea what was happening. He was a joke.
Any more witnesses for the state you think we need to know about?
Off the top of my head, those are the main ones. There were so many people that were called, but those are the main ones.
You forgot one, but I'm not going to even. I'm going to add him. Jeffrey Herbsman.
I mean, that's the main one. That was the star of the whole trial was Jeffrey Herbsman. He was ridiculous.
All right, so let's go through the witnesses the prosecution called. I want to hear about the direct exam and I want to hear about the cross-examination. So let's start with the neighbor.
Okay. So the neighbor was the guy who I had kind of touched on before. He was the guy who was outside and who said he heard the screams around 1:30 a.m. And then when he got to trial, he's now changed his testimony and convinced himself that those were not screams, that was in fact chanting from the protesters that were protesting at the casino outside. So his direct examination was pretty funny because this guy goes through talking about this watch that he has and how his watch tells him his sleep patterns and this and that. And he said he couldn't have been outside at 1:30 a.m. because his watch shows that he had woken up already and then he had went back home and he was already asleep in REM sleep at like 1:35. First of all, for people that don't know, like REM sleep is like the deepest state of sleep that you can be in, and it takes a while for your body to even get there. So the fact that this guy is testifying that minutes later he was in REM sleep is ridiculous. Like, I don't think he knows what REM sleep is. So that was like kind of the basis of his testimony on direct, was like, yeah, like I have this watch, and the prosecutor was like putting up photographs of like this guy's screenshots of his watch and like whatever. We just ripped him apart. Like, he got ripped apart the minute he took. So cross was phenomenal for this guy because, number one, this guy seemed, I don't know, to me he seemed like he was on something when he took the stand, but that could very well just be his personality. I don't know this man, so I would have no idea to say one way or another, but he seemed very weird. Like his whole demeanor was very odd, and it seemed like he was on something. So I was like, this guy is super strange. But he wanted to overtalk Brian. He didn't want to answer the questions. Brian was very direct and to the point with the questions. He was like, no, I never said I was callous. I never said I felt guilty. We played him the body cam, and he was like, oh, I see what you're trying to do there. Like, sir, no one's trying to do anything. This is how cross-examination goes. You said something different before, and now we're showing you what you said because you're saying something different now. So he was hilarious. Like, there were so many people that during this trial, like, their testimony was so funny that I'm not even lying, Chris. I had to take my legal pad and put it in front of my face and turn my face away to laugh because I could not let the jury see me laughing. But it was so comical what was actually happening in court. Like, these people's testimony was so comical. I was like, this cannot be real. We cannot really be trying a man's entire life right now with this. This is a joke. This doesn't even make sense anymore. So it's really started off with the neighbor. The neighbor, he started off my laughs for me. I was like, this guy is crazy. But I'll get you his name. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. I should know his name. He was so funny. Right.
Next, we have Detective Sarah Markle.
Oh, Detective Sarah Markle so she was the woman who did the cell phone dump of Michael Jackson Bolanos' phone. Her testimony was absolutely atrocious in the sense that this is the most condescending woman to take the stand. Like, well, I don't know that she's the most. There were so many people, but she had such a condescending attitude towards Brian. So her entire direct examination, every time she was asked a question, she knew the answer. She was able to answer everything that the prosecutor, Ryan Elsey, was asking, even to the point where Ryan Elsey asks her and says, because at one point they say that Michael Jackson Bolanos had looked up same-day passport in his Google searches on his phone, right? So Ryan Elsey says, you heard about Jeffrey Herbsman. Like, did you hear about Jeffrey Herbsman's involvement with this case? She's like, yeah. And he was like, so when was Jeffrey Herbsman arrested and taken in for interrogation? And she was like, well, I don't know the exact dates. Like, I remember I heard it on the news, but I don't remember the exact dates. He's like, well, would I be able to refresh your recollection with something? So he pulls out this Detroit newspaper, right, that has an article in there about Jeffrey Herbsman being released for, it didn't even state Jeffrey Herbsman's name. It just said like individual that was originally arrested for Samantha Wall's murder has been released, whatever. And he hands it to her to refresh her. First of all, you can't refresh her recollection with something she's never testified that she's ever seen before. Right. She never said she's seen this article. So how are you refreshing her recollection with something she never said she's seen it. She never said she read it. She said she heard it on the news. This is a newspaper. Like what? And so Elsie's arguing. He's like, I can refresh recollection with anything. Yes, but no. There has to be some foundational basis that this person has ever seen this before.
That's right.
Otherwise, how are you refreshing the recollection? There's nothing to recollect because there's no foundation laid.
She would have had to have encountered it somehow if you're going to refresh her memory.
And the judge let this slide. The judge was like, no, he can do it. We were like, okay. The judge allowed her recollection to be refreshed. So she looks at this newspaper and she's like, yeah, November 7th and 8th and whatever. And so Elsie was like, so what did you find in Michael Jackson Bolanos' cell phone? She was like, yeah, he Googled same day passport. Chris, when Michael Jackson Bolanos took the stand and he was asked about that, he was like, I had a friend who was having a birthday party in Windsor and I needed a passport to be able to go to the birthday party in Windsor. I looked it up.
Where's Windsor?
Windsor's in Canada, which is like really close to us. It's right there.
Oh, okay.
The prosecutor was trying to say that Michael Jackson Bolanos got nervous because somebody else had been originally, investigated for Samantha Wall's murder and they had been released. So he was trying to flee the country. What? Let me tell you something. If he was the real murderer, why wouldn't he have fled the country? It has been months. She was murdered in October. He was not arrested until December 10th. That gave him months. Why wouldn't he have been gone? He's going to wait around to see if someone else gets picked up for it. Like, no, if he committed this murder for real, he would have been gone.
That's a bit much. It sounds like she was allowed to speculate.
Yes. There was so many objections by the defense were overruled. And we had very good, valid objections, and they were overruled. That was ridiculous. That was absolutely ridiculous that any of this was allowed. Like, we were like, what is it? And then she was like, oh, Sarah Markle testified that he had downloaded a police scanner app. And so Ryan Elsey, the prosecutor's theory was he was listening to this police scanner app to find out the information that the police knew about this. Like, shut the absolute hell up. That is so ridiculous. And the app had shown that this guy might have used the app like once in a while for like a minute or 2 minutes at a time. Like, it wasn't like, so in a minute or 2 minutes, he's just sitting here like, oh, maybe they're talking about the murder. Like, how ridiculous is that? That is a ridiculous theory to even propose that this guy downloaded a police scanner app. Again, why wouldn't he have just left already? He's not going to sit here. It's not like, what does this guy have, like a career job? He's getting paid 6 figures and he's got to stay here. Like, he would have just picked up and left. And then also there was like, during the trial, which I'll get to with the whole blood. Oh my gosh, so much.
Stephen Ford, tell me about him.
Stephen Ford was one of the arresting officers. He was one of the he was a homicide detective, okay? And he was one of the arresting officers or the interrogation, I should say. And then ultimately when they charged Michael Jackson Bolanos with Samantha Wall's murder, he was the officer that told him he was being charged with the murder. Stephen Ford was so condescending, so absolutely egregious. If we take Stephen Ford's interrogation of Michael Jackson Bolanos and we put it right next to the way that Jeffrey Herbsman was interrogated, you will see a striking night and day difference between the two. Stephen Ford used absolutely derogatory language towards Michael Jackson Bolanos. He called him a poor, homeless, broke, a motherfucker. Like, he talked so poorly to this man and degraded him. It was absolutely atrocious to watch. And when he was questioned about the language that he used when speaking, because his whole testimony was Michael Jackson Bolanos was being evasive for his questions and this and that. No, you told him that he broke into Samantha Wall's house and murdered her, and he said, no, he didn't. That's not being evasive. That's answering the question. No, he didn't. He was like, what woman are you talking about? He's like, well, I didn't go inside of anyone's house that night. He's like, I went inside cars. I didn't go inside anyone's house. He was like, we have you on video going inside her house. He's like, show me. If you have me on video, show it to me. I want to see it. He was like, we know you went in there. We have your cell phone in her house. He was like, that's not possible. He's like, you cannot have, he's like, the only house I went into was my girlfriend's house. I left her house and I went back to her house. That's the only house I went inside. And Stephen Ford just started he was getting so pissed that he couldn't shake Michael Jackson Bolanos that he just starts degrading him. He starts yelling and screaming at him, calling him this and that. So of course Bolanos gets a little turned up and he's like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about, right? Like he starts talking like that, but that's expected. You're telling this man that he broke into some lady's house and murdered her, and he has no idea what the hell you're talking about. Of course he's going to get defensive. Who would not, like, you expect this man to just stay calm in this situation and be like,
well, the problem is if he stays calm, they're going to say, oh, he's calm. He's a cold-blooded murderer. Like, you can't win.
Okay. You literally cannot win. So Stephen Ford Brian Brown did a phenomenal job of making Stephen Ford out to be the asshole that he is, because he truly is. He is truly one of those people that now I know police are allowed to lie during an interrogation. We are aware of that, but it is the way in which he lied. And when he did not get what he felt should have been the response to his lies, he tried to up the ante by just getting aggressive with Bolanos, just getting downright nasty and getting aggressive with him. And then he tried to change the entire scenario and say that Bolanos was the one getting aggressive. Like he tries to flip that narrative and be like, Bolanos was the one getting aggressive and Bolanos was the one getting this way and that way. And he was getting so defensive and blah, blah, blah. Bolanos never once called this man out of his name. He never once said anything. Like he did say, like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. But
did you guys get to play the interrogation in the trial, during the trial?
Yes. The prosecutor played the entire interrogation. He was actually arrested for this one time before, and then he was arrested a second time. And the second time he was arrested was when they had gotten back the trace DNA from his jacket and a backpack. There was 2 microscopic specks of Samantha Wall's DNA on the sleeve of his jacket, and 1 spot on the speck on his backpack that he had that night. And so the prosecutor felt like he had sealed and dealed this case because of 2 specks of Samantha Wall's blood. No, the speck of blood being on his right sleeve makes sense because he bent down to check her, that there could be a trace amount of blood based off of that. And the backpack, when he picked up his backpack to put it on, a speck of blood could have also gotten on the backpack. When he bent down to touch her, there was blood on his hand. He testified to that. There was blood on his hand when he bent down to touch her, and he had to wipe it off later. So that makes sense that would have been either on the backpack or on the sleeve or whatever. But so Stephen Ford, when they ended up getting that DNA hit back, that's when they arrested him for the second time, when he had that little blade or what. No, that wasn't actually, they arrested him off the queue line the second time. It was the first time he had that little pocket knife on him. But yeah, so Stephen Ford ultimately ended up charging him with her murder. Absolute joke of a guy. Lance Sullivan, if we're just moving down that,
we can go to Lance.
Yeah. Or Patrick Lane was the one who was in there with Stephen Ford. So Patrick Lane was the other homicide detective in there, questioning him. Oh, I do want to bring this up. This was fantastic because this was in the interrogation video that they played. So it was Stephen Ford and it was Patrick Lane, and they were interrogating Michael Jackson Bolanos, and he didn't even know, like, they had brought him in and said that they were questioning him for property crimes. They said that there was a pair of Cartier sunglasses that he had pawned, and that's what they brought him in for. And he was like, I didn't steal those glasses. He said he was out at a bar and the glasses had fallen on the floor. Like somebody had obviously lost their glasses, and he picked them up and took them. He was like, but I didn't steal it. He's like, I didn't steal them from anyone. And they're pressing him and they're like, well, it wasn't yours and you took it. And he was like, yeah, but nobody was claiming possession over them. He was like, they were Cartiers. Like, yeah, I took them and I pawned them for the money. So he thought he was in there for property crimes because that's what they told him he was in there for. They were like, you're in here for these glasses. So then as this interrogation is going, finally at one point, they're like, do you know where you are? And he's like, the police station. And they're like, yeah, but do you know where you are in the police station? And he's like, no. So they take their card. Patrick Lane takes his card and he slides his card across the table. And Bolanos is like, what? So he looks at it and he was like, homicide? He's like, hell no. Hell no. He like, I ain't never killed no one. He like, man, I done held a gun before, but I ain't never shot it at nobody. I ain't never shot no gun. This man's first mind, when he sees he's in the homicide thing and they've been talking to him about a lady and he has no idea what's going on, he thinks that this woman has been shot and killed. If that doesn't go to his innocence also, this woman has been stabbed to death 8 times. As soon as he sees a homicide card, because in the city of Detroit, death by way of gunfire is the most prominent way of people's death in this city, his brain goes to, oh my God, someone was shot. He's like, I held a gun before, but I ain't never shot nobody. To me, that screamed innocence too. Right. He doesn't even try to weasel his way around something and be like, he straight up starts talking about a gun. This case had nothing to do with a gun, right? But they thought they were like doing all this like tricky things to him or whatever. Absolute joke. Okay. Patrick Lane was absolutely a joke. Also, Patrick Lane and Stephen Ford, the video footage of, I told you, the guy that looks like Jeffrey Herbsman that's running away, that video footage, which they didn't find, we as the defense found that. The prosecution never found this person or zoomed in on this person. They never did their job because they have their eyes set on Michael Jackson Bolanos. Right. So they tried to make everything fit Michael Jackson Bolanos rather than do their job, which is to be neutral and impartial and investigate. They didn't do that. But that footage was taken either by, or because all of this video evidence was either collected by Patrick Lane or Stephen Ford, because both of them point fingers at each other for the stuff that wasn't done. But that exact footage came from the back of an elementary school. That person is running towards an apartment building that is adjacent to that school. There was never any security footage that was taken from that apartment building. There was never even a request put in to subpoena that footage. That footage could have very well showed very clearly who that individual was. And I'm willing to bet that would have showed that it was Jeffrey Herbsman. But when they were on the stand, Patrick Lane was asked, well, did you ever subpoena that footage from that apartment complex? He said, no, that wasn't my job. That was Stephen Ford's job. So when Stephen Ford took the stand, Stephen Ford was asked, did you ever subpoena that video footage? Where is that video footage from? He said, no, that wasn't my job. That was Patrick Lane's job. Nobody even knows whose job. Basically, nobody did it. And nobody even knows whose job is what job. Y'all are just doing everything you can to try to make it look like Michael Jackson Bolanos. But nobody had curiosity to look through this video footage very thoroughly and see that at 1:35, there's a guy running away from the scene that looks like Jeffrey Herbsman. And nobody thought, why don't we get the video footage from the place of the direction he's running towards? That's too much police work for y'all. That's crazy.
There's a saying, you may have heard it. To a man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So it's
I've never heard of it, yes.
Yeah, to a man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So once they locked in on Michael Jackson Bolanos, the only objective was to look for evidence that fit him being the perpetrator. Which is terrible police work. You're supposed to search for the truth, not develop tunnel vision and go after a person.
And let me tell you something else that's very interesting, that's very on point with what you said. His car, which had absolutely no evidentiary value at trial, was swabbed for DNA, Photographs of it were taken, and the prosecution entered those photographs as evidence against Michael Jackson Bolanos at trial. His car had nothing to do with anything. However, I found out after trial, when I had the prosecutor and the judge sign an order to return all of the property to me, I was going to have his car returned as well to give it back to his family and, to give all the property back to everyone because they want their property back and they have a right to have it back, right? I called up to the impound lot, or the Detroit police impound lot, whatever, that was holding the car. And I called and I gave them the VIN number and I told them, I didn't tell them I was the attorney. I just said, hey, I have an order for this property back. I need to get this car. And the woman looks up the VIN number and everything. And she's like, oh, a Dodge Challenger 4-door black. I was like, yep. She goes, oh, that car was auctioned on January 10th of 2023 or 2024. I said, wait, what? She said, yeah, it was already auctioned. We did a police auction for it on January 10th of 2024. Chris, if you remember, trial did not start until June 10th of 2024. As a matter of fact, he had a 2-day preliminary exam. His first day of preliminary exam did not begin until January 16th of 2024. So 6 days before his preliminary exam even began, when he's still innocent until proven guilty, y'all have auctioned his car away? The same car that y'all took photographs of and actually used as evidence against him at trial? What if one of the members of the jury would have said they wanted to see the car? Because they have a right to see the car in real life.
I bet had you known that, you would have said, hey, ask to see the car. Yeah.
Oh, I sure would have. Because the interesting part then, Chris, is that the lady puts me on hold after telling me the car's been auctioned on January 10th. She gave me the date. She hangs up on me. She puts me on hold and hangs up. I call back. I get a different lady. And I tell this lady, I'm like, yeah, I'm calling about this car, blah, blah, blah. She goes, oh, ma'am, we can't give you any information about that car. Who are you? I was like, I'm the attorney. She goes, yeah, we don't have any information about that car. I said, yes, you do. I just spoke to a different woman, and she just told me the car was auctioned on January 10th of 2024. She goes, well, I don't know who told you that, but they're not allowed to tell you that information. That's in our system. That's not information we give out. Well, too fucking bad. Someone already gave it to me. I already know that now. And now I know that you guys wanted to railroad this man so badly. Y'all sold this man's car when he was still innocent until proven guilty because y'all were so sure you had it in the bag. You were so sure he was going to prison for the rest of his life for a murder that he would never need a car again. So y'all went ahead and got rid of the man's car. Stop playing with me.
Are y'all going to sue him for the car or the value of the car?
Everybody's about to get a lawsuit. We about to be handing them out like Oprah, okay? Everybody's about to get a lawsuit. Y'all did this man so dirty. Y'all better quit playing with this man. Nah. Everybody getting a lawsuit, Chris. We about to be handing them out, okay?
That's good. Nope. That's good. Hit them where it hurts.
Period.
So we got Patrick Lane. Next we got Lance Sullivan from the FBI.
Lance Sullivan is hilarious. So Lance Sullivan takes a stand and he's testifying on direct exam that he has been following Michael Jackson Bolanos, right? That was his job. So Stephen Ford and Patrick Lane collected all the videos, and Lance Sullivan had to put all the videos together to make the compilation video of Michael Jackson Bolanos walking around Detroit City all night long, right? So he testifies to this, and they show this compilation video, and it's a very long compilation video, and the prosecutor shows it, and Sullivan is testifying, yeah, that's Michael Jackson Bolanos. There he is there he is there he is there, blah, 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 blah. Hilarious. We get up as the defense, right? And Brian started, because we had done all this. When I had taken these videos to the jail and was talking with them with Bolanos, I'm playing the compilation video and stuff. He goes, Pete, stop. He was like, stop it right there. He's like, rewind it. So I rewind it. He's like, that's not me. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, damn, bro, that's not you. A dude with whole different clothes on and everything. Just another black man wearing different black clothes. He was like, who the hell is that? He was like, that's not me. He's like, they can't say that's me. That's not me. I said, bro, hold on. Let me keep watching. We get this whole clip. It's not him. They're tracking the wrong person. And they trying to say it's him. Talk about he went into this other car lot and then he jogged out of here and started coming up the street. They don't have him. That's not him. So after Lance Sullivan gets done with the prosecutor on direct, yeah, that's Michael Jackson Bolanos and da-da-da-da. Brian Brown gets up and goes, so you're sure you were tracking just Michael Jackson Bolanos that night? He goes, yeah, I'm sure. He's like, you're confident of that? He was like, yeah, I'm positive. I was tracking Michael Jackson Bolanos. He goes, so there's no possibility you could have been tracking someone else? He goes, no, I was tracking Michael Jackson Bolanos. Basically, this guy's saying he thinks all black people look the same, okay? Without just saying it, that's what he's saying. Because then, boom, we show him the video that's not Michael Jackson Bolanos. And he goes, no, that's Michael Jackson Bolanos. And Brian's like, you're sure? That's Michael Jackson Bolanos. He was like, yeah. And Brian's like, how are you sure? He's like, he's got the same walk. I know that walk. He's got the same walk. The same walk is crazy. Okay.
What is that?
What is that? I don't even know what that is, but that's crazy. And this man is doubling and tripling down on his confidence. Okay. Yeah, no, that's the same guy. That's Michael Jackson Bolanos. Cool. Brian plays him another clip that's not inside the compilation video that shows this guy walking in front of this Gordon Food Services store. And he goes, who is this guy? And he goes, that's Michael Jackson Bolanos. And Brian's like, so you're sure that's Michael Jackson Bolanos? He was like, yeah, I'm sure. Brian's like, okay, let's keep watching the video. About 2 minutes later, you see Michael Jackson Bolanos walk up. He goes, well, then who is that guy? He goes, oh, great catch. Yeah, that's Michael Jackson. Great catch? Trial. You are an FBI investigator, bro. Great catch? What? I said, man, this cannot be real. Again, I had my legal pad up and I'm laughing. I'm like, this can't be real. This cannot be real. This man gonna talk about some great catch.
What did he say after that? What did he say after that? After the great catch,
like, what? Yeah. He's like, no, that's Michael Jackson Bolanos. And so Brian's like, so you're positive still that you were only tracking Bolanos this whole time? He goes, well, I mean, I thought I was, but yeah, I mean, that was, I made a mistake there. Bro, and y'all made a whole compilation video and didn't use this part of the compilation video, obviously, because that doesn't help you guys. Who even reviewed all of this footage? Y'all didn't even review all of the footage. Y'all just sat here and clipped this and clipped that and sewed together a video, but y'all don't even know what y'all sewed together. How dare you get on this stand and say, great catch, my man? That's crazy work. This man's whole life is on the line. And you was up here doubling and tripling down that you was following the right dude, but great catch. Because if we didn't catch it, y'all would have let this jury believe that y'all had done your job so well and y'all were tracking Michael Jackson Bolanos the whole time. That's crazy. Like the incompetence of not only the FBI, Michigan State Police, and DPD, it was shining a light. I said, damn, for this to just be me and Brian, it was just me and Brian. We are the investigators of this case for the defense. And they got 3 government agencies and all of them suck. That's crazy. That's absolutely insane. That's
people that's hard for people to accept, but I tell people all the time, law enforcement gets it wrong much more than you would ever imagine. And we don't want to accept that as the public because that puts us all in a position where we could be victims of the system. So people try to reject that idea, but I mean, quite honestly, it happens every day.
All the time. Great catch. That was Lance Sullivan. Crazy.
After Lance, there's a pregnant woman. OIC. Oh. I think you said OIC.
OIC. Yes. Oh my gosh.
What is OIC? I don't know what that acronym stands for.
OIC is the officer in charge. So the original officer in charge of the case was this woman, whose name is just slipping my mind, but I will give it to you. This woman was ridiculous. Okay. So she takes the stand. She's going through direct with the prosecutor. Oh, she remembers everything. She has every answer for every single question that the prosecutor is asking. Boom. She flies through her direct. Okay. She's up there for cross. All of a sudden, amnesia hits her. She can't remember anything. Not one single thing. She can't remember whether or not she investigated Jeffrey Herbsman. Oh, no, she did investigate Jeffrey Herbsman. But Jeffrey Herbsman was removed as a suspect because he beat her test of investigating skills. So did you collect this evidence? Did you collect his clothes that he was wearing that night? No, we didn't. Did you go to the synagogue and even verify with anyone at the synagogue that he was even there that night? Well, I don't remember. Did you go and get the video footage at the synagogue to prove that he was at the synagogue? I don't remember. Okay, do you think it's important to investigate an individual who confesses to a murder? I don't remember. You don't remember if you currently think that's important? I don't remember. She was intentionally... How do you not remember? I'm not asking you to remember what you thought then. I'm asking you, do you think currently, right now, it is important to investigate somebody that admits to a murder? I don't remember. Prosecution asked and answered. Judge is like, sustained. Or, yeah, what What?
What was it? Wasn't answered. It wasn't answered.
It's ridiculous for her to give the answer "I don't remember" to what her current opinion is,
Yeah,
and for that to be sustained as an objection.
I'm really disappointed that the judge didn't order her to answer that question.
There was several questions that the judge did not order her to ask. Everything from that point became "I don't remember." It doesn't matter what Brian asked. She robotically gave the answer "I don't remember" for everything at that
That's
point.
good. That's good.
I mean, she like a complete idiot in front of this jury. This jury is like, this. Brian was like, "Did you take notes?" "I don't remember." So you don't remember if you, as the officer in charge of a murder investigation, you don't remember if you took notes. "I don't remember." Okay. Who did you speak to in regards to this? "I don't remember." Every single, I was like, this woman is a joke. This is how much of a joke these people, meaning these government agencies, they are playing with somebody's whole life. Like, as actual, I was almost in like a point of hysteria, which is why I was laughing so hard. Like, I was lacking sleep, lacking food. I was hysterical. All I could do was laugh because the only other thing I wanted to do was get up and smack the shit out of this woman. I was like, you are playing with this man's whole life. Stop it. This is not funny. This is not a joke. Like, you can't get up here and just say, "I don't know." Answer this man's damn questions. You got this man's whole life sitting online. But they think this is such a joke. They think they could just play and toy with people as easy as that, to get up there and be like, "I don't know. I don't remember. I don't remember. I don't remember. What do you currently think?" "I don't remember." Girl, bye. What the hell you mean you don't remember? That's crazy.
That's right.
But she got away with it.
So after the pregnant officer, we get Chad. I think you said there was an individual named Chad who took over for her.
Bosman or something. Or I don't remember exact. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah. Chad. God, it was Chad Osman. Chad Osman. This is hilarious. So this guy, there was another guy, Chadwick something. I got to talk about him too. But first, let's talk about Osman. Osman was the guy who, as soon as Michael Jackson Bolanos was charged with Samantha Wall's murder at the police station, Chad Osman transported Michael Jackson Bolanos from the police station to the Detroit Detention Center, which is the jail holding facility. In the car there, or not in the car, when they get out of the car and they're walking up to the place or whatever, Osman already has his body cam turned off. Michael Jackson Bolanos told us that he had told Osman, "I saw a lady that night, but I did not murder her. I saw her, and when I saw that she was dead, I got scared and I ran away." So we call Chad Osman as a witness, right? Osman gets on. Now, Brian Brown has already spoken to Osman at this time and verified that Osman has in fact had this conversation with Michael Jackson Bolanos, and he remembers having this conversation. He remembers Bolanos telling him he saw a woman that night, she was already dead, and he ran away. Osman gets on the stand and all of a sudden doesn't remember anything. Does not remember having this conversation with Brian Brown. He was like, Brian was like, "Yeah, do you remember you and I having a conversation?" He's like, "Yeah, do you mean at the pizza parlor?" Because literally during trial, just the day before, we had seen Osman at the pizza parlor when we had went there for lunch. And Brian was like, "No, I'm talking about weeks ago when you and I spoke on the phone. Don't you remember I asked you about Michael Jackson Bolanos, telling you some information when you took him into DDC?" He's like, "Oh, I don't remember." He was like, "Officer, you don't remember us having that conversation on the phone? Like, you don't remember that?" He was like, "I mean, I remember us talking on the phone. I just don't remember." And he was like, "Michael Jackson Bolanos told you that he saw a woman that night, but he did not kill her. He saw her. He got scared because he saw she was dead and he ran away." He's like, I don't remember that happening." Brian was like, "Officer, are you telling us right now that we did not have that conversation?" It took Brian so long till finally the guy was like, "Yeah, okay, yes, I do remember that. He did tell me that night. Like that night, Michael Jackson Bolanos did tell me that he had seen a woman that night and she was already dead and he did not kill anyone and he ran away." It took so much for Brian to get this guy to admit that he had that conversation.
So ridiculous. He was lying. He was essentially on the witness stand, gave an oath, swore to tell the truth, and was lying. Police don't typically do that though, right? That doesn't happen.
Oh no, that never happens. Like, get out of here, right? So then the other guy, Chadwick, whatever his name was, This guy creates a video, right, that we objected to the use of. He creates a video and he wants to testify that he walked, he ran, and he jogged the path that Michael Jackson Bolanos took from Samantha Wall's place to Greektown Casino to try to prove that this could have happened in the timeline that the prosecution is suggesting that this happened. First of all, that is objectionable, number one, for several reasons. So ultimately, the judge didn't let them use the video, but the judge did let them testify to it. That testimony shouldn't even come in for several reasons. That is so objectionable for several reasons. Number one, it's more prejudicial than probative because Chad, the officer, is not Michael Jackson Bolanos. They're not the same age. They're not the same race. They're not the same health. They're not the same athleticism. And let's get to the bigger point, which what path are you suggesting? Nobody has even ever been able to show by way of facts or evidence the path that Michael Jackson Bolanos took that night. That's also a issue. So how can you say you timed anything? You don't know what path he took. You don't know where he walked, where he ran, where he jogged. You don't know if he walked, ran, or jogged. Also, you're not taking into account that the prosecution's timeline includes him going into the house, tussling with her, stabbing her 8 times, him getting out of the house, and her getting out of the house. So where is the accounting for all of that time in this testimony you're giving? Also, according to Michael Jackson Bolanos, which is the truth, because he never went inside Samantha Wall's house, he saw Samantha Wall outside her neighbor's house. So where is that accounted for in this timeline that you're talking about? It would have had to been a timeline from the neighbor's house to Greektown Casino. But again, you don't know what that exact path was. You don't know how direct or indirect that path was. You don't know. And so we objected to that testimony. The judge let it in. She let this guy get on the stand and testify how long it took him to walk, run, and jog this path, whatever freaking path this is. Like, what are we doing anymore? Like, this is not even a trial anymore. All of this, we're just talking about like ghosts and rainbows now. Like, what? That has absolutely no relevant evidentiary basis
at all. Literally, it almost sounds like something you see on TV and like, yeah, that doesn't happen in real life.
For real. That is literally, this turned into a freaking CSI episode. I'm like, what is going on? This is all made for TV. This is not real life. Like, there is no other judge and there is no other case in which this testimony would prove itself relevant, where it would actually be admissible to testify to in a trial in front of a jury. That's crazy. That absolutely insane. The judge let it in. I was like, that's insane. Okay.
So after, well, I don't know if we're going in a specific order, but next we have the medical examiner.
The medical examiner, hilarious. So the state's medical examiner was called. Now, Samantha Wall, because she's Jewish, I guess in the Jewish faith, they have a thing where a deceased body has to be buried within 24 hours of finding out that the person has died. I guess that's not a thing I ever knew before, but I learned that because of this trial. So they were unable to do a complete autopsy on Samantha Wall because the family was insisting that she be immediately buried. Like, she had to be buried that same day or whatever within that 24-hour period. So she was found on a Saturday morning, and I believe she was buried the following day, which still would have been beyond the 24-hour thing, but whatever. She was buried that Sunday because they had the funeral and everything for her, and she was buried that day. So the medical examiner's report was pretty inconclusive outside of the fact that her cause of death was 8 stab wounds to the back of the head and to the neck, right? They did not measure the depth of the stab wounds. They did not measure the width of the stab wounds. They did not, very poorly done. They had access to the body. Now, maybe you couldn't have gotten as detailed as, if you had a more amount of time, which also, while I respect everyone having faith and having their own religious beliefs or whatever, when you have something like a murder that just occurred and this is your family member, you would think that, like whatever God you believe in will forgive you for not following protocol and allowing a complete autopsy to be done so that a thorough investigation as to who murdered your loved one could
Right.
actually happen. But I digress. So their medical examiner had a very basic medical examiner report, which had really nothing of any actual value in it. Okay. We called a medical examiner. Now, their medical examiner was like a woman with like 5 years of like history, whatever. We called a guy, Dr. Dragovich. Dr. Dragovich is a world renowned medical examiner. World renowned. He's been all over Dateline. He's been international. He's written textbooks. He writes textbooks that medical students use to this day. This guy is world renowned. He was our medical examiner. He testified to just using photographs because he only got the state's medical examiner's report and the photographs that were taken by the medical examiner. So he estimated what the width and the depth of the wounds were just based on his experience, having done this for like 40 something years and having the level of expertise that he has. He gave his best estimates as to what he thought certain things were. And he said, he wrote in his report, like, I couldn't do a thorough examination of this because no original examination was actually thoroughly done. So I can't even really compare very well because this is an incomplete medical examiner's report done by the state. This is an incomplete report. It doesn't have enough for me to be able to give my full opinion on. However, he told us that he said that his opinion was that based on the location of the wounds, based on the type of the wounds being stab wounds, based on the location and the pattern of the wounds, that it was his expert opinion that this was a crime of passion. This was a crime of passion. The judge would not allow him to testify to that during trial. She said, absolutely not. He's a medical examiner. He cannot testify to the mental state of the person who committed this crime. We said, but he's done it before. He's done it in multiple trials before. He has done this. Is world renowned. This is not a Joe Schmo who's been doing this for a couple of years. This guy has written the textbook on it. Okay. This guy has been all over the news. He's done so many trials, thousands of trials in his life. She said, absolutely not. He can't testify to that. She said, there's no medical examiners that can testify to the state of mind of the individual who committed a crime. Well, no, that's not true. You may not know any, but hello, meet Dr. Dragovich, who can do that. Because he's been doing it for 40 something years, 40 plus years. And it makes sense to him that, again, based on the location, based on the pattern, based on these being stab wounds, again, to the back of the head and to the neck, that is a crime of passion. That is someone who truly hates someone. And again, let's also think about this too. According to the state's theory, if Michael Jackson Bolanos had went into this house because he was just out on this like larceny spree that night and went into her house, if he encounters Samantha Wall and then got into this tussle with her or whatever, that would not cause him to stab her in the back of the head 8 times or in the neck. Like that's,
I know.
The only purpose in then stabbing someone under that circumstance would be to be able to get away. You'd be like, oh shit, I didn't know you were here. Boop, boop, trying to get away. 8 stab wounds to the back of the head. You got to go through skull. You got to go through neck like that. No one's doing that. So Dr. Dragovich is in fact correct. This is a crime of passion. Judge would not let him testify to that. So she was like, he can just get up there and testify that it was an inconclusive or incomplete medical examiner's report. It's like, dude, we called this world-renowned guy to come and give his world-renowned opinion, and you won't even let him give it. Like, again, railroading, absolute railroading, ridiculous.
Wow.
So, yeah.
I'm not, I am surprised. There's so much in this case that I'm surprised about, but I'm not surprised because it appears that they decided that Michael Jackson Bolanos was going to prison for this murder, and they were willing to do whatever it took to secure a conviction.
100% they were.
Tell me about the blood spatter expert.
So the blood spatter expert was, she actually ended up being very helpful to us because so she gave her direct and she said that according to her expertise that this murder would have had to have the origination of this crime happened on the couch, based on the blood spatter on the couch, on the pillows near the couch, on the carpet in that area. That is the point of origination of this crime. And then that Samantha must have then made her way into the hallway, where it appears that she fell in the hallway because there were hand marks, which they were able to say were Samantha's hand marks that were on the wall, as if she was trying to pull herself up. And that was like on direct, basically everything that she testified to. Now, the prosecution, what they did not want us to be able to get out, which we did, was that the medical or the blood spatter analyst agreed with us that those pools of blood in that hallway are a telltale sign that that body had to have been there for a substantial period of time to have accumulated that much blood in different areas in that hallway. That cannot happen in a 60-second time frame. That will not happen. There's no 60-second time frame with which this much blood can accumulate here, here, and here. It can't happen. And she agreed with us. She was like, no, that had to have been a period of time. There's a period of time that lapsed with that accumulating. That in and of itself destroys the prosecution's theory. Like, there are so many things that destroyed the prosecution's theory of things that I just truly did not understand. I just didn't understand how any of this, how the prosecution was even possibly going through this. It was so sick to me. It was so
just
sick.
remember what I told you. To a man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Yeah, but at some point, you know, the man's got to put the hammer down and stop looking at the nail, because this was crazy.
That's so true. Like, this is the wrong tool. This is
the wrong tool.
This is a screw. Why do I still have a hammer?
Okay. It was so, I mean, it was so sad. Honestly, it was so sad. It was so pathetic on the part of the prosecution. It was so pathetic, and it was so sad for me to sit there and watch Bolanos have to go through this, and for us to just be like, I was flabbergasted so many times throughout this trial, which actually made me really sad for him. I was like, I can't imagine if this was my life hanging in the hands of all of these people that promised this jury that they've done such a great investigation, and this is the bullshit they're showing me. Right. Like, I would have been so frustrated and so angry, and it made me sad that he had to feel that way.
That's
like,
right.
It truly broke my heart.
Officer Q.
Oh my gosh. Officer Q was such a joke. So Officer Q was one of the first responding officers to the scene at 6:30 a.m. when Samantha Wall's body was found outside the neighbor's house. Officer Q was hilarious. So he testifies that he refused on cross-examination. He refused to admit that he showed up to the scene at 6:30 a.m. Like, he wanted to change the time. And I can't remember what he wanted to change the time to, but he kept wanting to change the time. He had a dash cam in his car. The dash cam showed the time. We showed him the dash cam and we were like, is this your car? Is this you getting out of that car? He's like, yeah. We're like, okay, well, what does that time say? He's like, 6:30. We're like, okay, so you arrived there at 6:30. He's like, no, that's, I don't know why that says that. We're like, okay, so is your dash cam incorrect? Like, is it inaccurate? He's like, no, it's accurate. Then you are like, why is this even a point that you're arguing? Like, sir, there's so many other things you can argue. Why is this what you're arguing? Like, okay, so then that's 6:30. He's like, no, I didn't arrive there at 6:30. Sir, you arrived there at that shows this is your car. This is your police car. This is your police car's dash cam. This is your police car's dash cam showing us an accurate date and time. This is you getting out of your own police car. You agreed to that. So how are you saying it's not? Like, the amount of things they wanted to argue about? I was like, man, this guy is so sad. Which actually reminds me of another guy whose name I don't remember at this time. He was one of the officers who took the photographs of the items inside Samantha Wall's house, right? Mm-hmm. So there was a photograph of her wallet and her purse and everything. And he had taken the wallet out of the purse to be able to take a photograph of her ID that was in her wallet or whatever. And then there was other stuff like a credit card and this and that and money and a laptop that was on in another area of the house, like in the living room area. So On cross-examination, Brian is asking this guy, Brian's like, all of this stuff was out in the open, right? Like this was all out in the open to be able to see. And he's like, yeah, no, it was all in the same area. And Brian's like, wait a minute, what was all in the same area? He was like, the purse and the credit card and whatever. And Brian's like, no. Like, he was like, so Brian shows him the photograph of the purse and the wallet, that he had taken the wallet out of the purse, and he shows him a photograph of this. He was like, do you see where this is? He was like, yeah. And then Brian shows him a photograph of the credit card and the cash and the laptop, right? To show that it's still there. If Michael Jackson Bolanos broke into this house to do a larceny, why wasn't anything taken? So he just breaks in there and kills someone, then leaves and doesn't take anything? Because the prosecutor was like, oh, he would have been scared that he would have been found with her property. You can take cash and no one will know where it came from. Cash is a thing that you can take. Like, and it's right there in his face. Like, it's sitting right there. Why would you not take the cash? At the very least, you know what I mean? Again, proving he never went in the house. He never killed anyone. All of this is proof of that. But this officer tells Brian, he's like, Brian's like, okay, well, this is the photograph of the credit card and the cash and the laptop. And the guy was like, no, that was moved. And he's like, I moved that. And Brian was like, you moved this stuff? He was like, the purse and the wallet and the credit card and the cash and everything, it was all together. Brian was like, so what did you move? He was like, I moved the purse. Brian was like, why would you move the purse? Why wouldn't you just take a photograph of the purse? If the purse was over here with the laptop and the cash and the credit cards, why wouldn't you take the photograph over here? He was like, because I moved it to take the wallet out. He's like, you don't have to move the purse to take the wallet out. You can open the purse and take the wallet out. And he's like, but I moved it. Brian was like, so you moved around things in a homicide crime scene. You moved things in a crime scene. And so you took different photographs of things. And he was like, yeah. Brian was like, tell me how that makes sense to you. You come in and your entire job is to photograph the scene as it was. That's your job, right? He's like, yeah. Brian's like, so you're telling me that if your job is to photograph the scene as it was, you're now on the stand saying that you intentionally went to the scene, moved things, and then took photographs of them in different locations. He's like, does that make sense to you? And the guy was like, no, actually, no, that doesn't make sense. Brian's like, well, that was tampering with the crime scene, right? He was like, yeah. He's like, and you did not tamper with it. Are you saying you tampered with the crime scene? He's like, yeah, no, I guess I didn't move anything. Bro, so did you move something or did you not move? Like now at this point, I don't even know what to believe. I don't know if you moved it or didn't move it. We don't know. We only got the photographs after the fact, right? So we have no idea. But it's ridiculous to me that you would even suggest as an officer, you are taking the stand and you yourself, usually it's us as defense attorneys that try to get them to say that they've tampered with a crime scene, right? We're trying to get this guy to say he did not tamper with a crime scene. And he's up here arguing with Brian that he did tamper with a crime scene. Crazy.
I've never seen that. I've never seen that.
It usually goes the opposite way. I'm like, what is happening right now? This guy is arguing that he did tamper with a crime scene. How stupid is this guy that he's on the stand as an officer trying to say, I definitely tampered with this crime scene. I definitely moved that purse over there to take a picture of that purse. Brian was like, why would you have to move the purse to take a picture of it? Like, it doesn't even make any sense. He's like, I moved it over there. Then finally the guy realizes that is tampering with a crime scene and goes, oh yeah,
I didn't do that.
I guess I didn't do that. How stupid are these people? I was like, this has got to be a joke. This is a joke of some sort. It is a
you know what's bad? As terrible as all these witnesses you've just gone through were, we still haven't talked about their star witness.
Jeffrey Herbsman.
Let's talk about the state's star witness in this murder case.
Jeffrey Herbsman. Jeffrey Herbsman takes the stand, and under direct examination, he says, of course, Ryan Elsey says, you were given immunity to testify at this trial, correct? And Herbsman
immunity,
was like, yeah.
What's that?
So he was given immunity, meaning that whatever he says at this trial cannot be used against him in a future prosecution. So he is free to tell the truth. And that was disclosed to the jury through the prosecutor when Herbsman took the stand. So Herbsman takes the stand and he goes through this entire direct examination with Ryan Elsey saying, yes, I dated Samantha Wall. We had dated and then we had broken up at the time that she was murdered. We had no longer been dating. And I never saw her on the day that she was murdered. I never saw her that day. I was at home by myself after I left synagogue, and I had, and then I woke up the next morning to go do yoga, blah, 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 blah. This is all his direct examination, right? So then Elsey gets to the day that he admitted to this murder and goes, so tell us about what happened on, November 7th, whatever. He's like, yeah, I drove to Kalamazoo. I was really having a panic attack. Like, my doctor had me on Ovelti, like some antipsychotic medication or whatever, antidepressant, whatever it is. He's like, and he had doubled my dose of Ovelti. So I get to Kalamazoo and I eat dinner. And then I had taken this double dose of Ovelti and then I drank a beer. So you're drinking on your medication, which I'm pretty sure your doctor would have told you not to do. Okay. He's like, I drank a beer and then I smoked some weed. And then I got really paranoid. Like, I went back into my hotel room and I got really, really paranoid when I went into my hotel room. And I started wondering, like, did I pack the right clothes for work? Like, I started getting really paranoid. So then I packed up my whole hotel room and then I went down into my car and then I called the police. And then I told them that I'm a danger to myself and to others. And I think I murdered my girlfriend. And, then he goes into the whole thing. Like, I think I murdered my girlfriend. Then the police come to the scene. And Elsey was like, do you remember the police talking to you at the scene? Like, do you remember telling the police, like, you had the motive and the opportunity and you were trying to outsmart people? He's like, yeah. And Elsey was like, well, what did you mean by that? Now he's like, because at the scene, the police asked him what he meant by that. Now he's like, I don't know what I meant by that. I was having a really bad panic attack, blah, blah, blah. Sir, if you are on all this antidepressant medication or antipsychotic, whatever this medication is, why are you drinking anything and why are you smoking weed? All of this sounds like a bad idea. But even otherwise, I have never known anybody in the history of my entire life, okay? And I used to be a weed smoker. I haven't been in quite some time now, but I used to be. So in all the time I smoked weed and everyone that I have ever known that currently does still smoke weed, I've never known anyone to smoke weed, get high, and then and confess to a murder they didn't commit. That's crazy. I've just never heard of that happening before. A beer and a joint, and all of a sudden you're confessing to a murder you didn't commit, or a vape pen, or whatever he's saying. I don't care. That doesn't happen.
I agree. And then it's a big coincidence. He confesses to a murder, and lo and behold, she's been murdered. What a big coincidence.
Okay. But the thing is, he confesses to this murder on November 7th. She was murdered on October 21st. So it had already been out in the news that she was murdered. Like, everybody knew she was murdered. So that's not really coincidental, but you also said the knife was under the front seat of your car, sir. Like, and when Allison Baker, again, the officer from Kalamazoo, who was the first officer that spoke to Jeffrey Herbsman on the scene, said when she walked up, he said, I killed her. She testified to that. He said, I killed her. Then it became, I think I killed her. 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 It doesn't matter whether you think you killed her or you killed her. Like, I don't care what you said, because it's still the same to me. And you can't convince me that this is a coerced confession or a forced. Nobody told you to call the police. You called them yourself.
What do you think would have happened to Michael Jackson Bolanos if he would have told Officer Ford that I think I killed her?
He would be in prison, convicted of murder. Convicted of murder. Let me tell you something. If Jeffrey Herbsman was a black man and Jeffrey Herbsman did what he did, Jeffrey Herbsman would be in prison for murder. Michael Jackson Bolanos would have never been charged with this crime if Jeffrey Herbsman was a black man and said that. That's what I believe.
I believe it too.
Because I have never heard of a person of color being able to admit to a murder and then be like, oops, my bad. I was smoking some weed and I doubled my dose of medication and I drank a beer. My bad. Didn't mean to say that. That's crazy. Well, they never get the benefit of that doubt.
Not at all.
But that man got to say that and take it back and then gets immunity to testify at trial.
So tell us about, there was something else really interesting because the investigative agencies did geofencing to track down Michael Jackson Bolanos. They basically tracked the pinging of his cell phone off different cell phone towers. But they were not able to do that with Jeffrey Epstein.
Herbsman.
Jeffrey Herbsman, they were not able to do that with him because his cell phone was
on airplane mode. And coincidentally, not really coincidentally, that was never brought up by the prosecutor. The prosecutor just gleaned over that part during direct. But in cross, we brought that to the attention.
Tell me how y'all took him down in cross.
Oh, again, shout out to Brian. Did a phenomenal job. We had every bullet in our arsenal ready to go, and we just kept pulling that trigger. I'm telling you, it was beautiful to watch. Phenomenal. Brian took him down the path of trying to get him, because again, that confession was not a panic attack. That was a guilt attack. You felt guilty that you murdered her, and the guilt got to you, which is why you called the police and confessed to that. That's what I believe. Brian also got to that because Brian said, okay, so you said you had this panic attack in your hotel room, right? He's like, yeah. He goes, and you said that you weren't thinking clearly when you called the police, right? And you confessed to this murder. He's like, yeah, I wasn't. It's like, okay. But you also said on direct that when you were inside that hotel room during this panic attack, that you were thinking about the clothes that you packed for your job, right? He's like, yeah. He's like, so you had enough train of thought to think about the clothes you packed, right? You thought about everything you packed, right? Yeah. And then you even thought about taking everything out of your hotel room and taking it and putting it in your car, right? Yeah, I thought, yeah. So you had enough forefront or forethought to think about all of those things, right? Yeah. But then all of a sudden you didn't know all of a sudden you lost control and didn't know what you were doing when you called the police and confessed to a murder. And Brian did it in a much more eloquent and methodical way where he talked about every single thing that Jeffrey Herbsman did before he made that phone call and was like, but you thought about this and you thought about that and you thought about this. How coincidental is it that all of a sudden now you're not thinking about anything and you're calling the police and confessing to a murder?
Great.
But you did all of these other things. I mean, Brian did a phenomenal job. Then we got to the point of the Kalamazoo when he called his parents, right? So because the point of that was, why did your parents never ask you what you were arrested for? The only time a parent, especially, I would ask anybody that, not even as a lawyer, but just as a friend. If someone calls me and tells me they've been arrested, the very first question I'm going to ask is, for what? I think that's just natural. Anybody's going to ask that question.
Yeah, and look, even if a client were to call me from jail, I'd say, what were you arrested for? Tell me what you're charged with. And we may not say anything else on that call, but at least I know what you're charged with.
Exactly. You're going to know that. Anybody in their right mind will ask that question, especially a parent. A parent is they're going to want to know what their kid has been charged with. I find it incredibly interesting that neither one of these parents, neither the mother nor the father, seemed to care what he was arrested for. Well, the only reason you wouldn't care about that is if you already knew. So Brian did a great job of doing that because Herbsman pretended as if he didn't remember this. He did not remember at all that this happened, right? And so Brian plays him the video, and he was like, Brian was like, yeah, well, your parents didn't ask you about why you were arrested. He was like, well, my parents knew not to ask those kind of questions over the phone. Shut up, boy, bye. If you don't get out of here with that. So Brian went down the path of, well, you had already retained an attorney, right? But you didn't even know, like, your parents had retained you an attorney because you didn't know her name. You didn't know her phone number. Your parents had retained you an attorney. Why did your parents retain you? And this is a criminal defense attorney, right? Yep. Well, why had your parents retained you a criminal defense attorney already? Nothing had happened. Like, if nothing happened, if you're so innocent and you're just, smoking your weed, drinking a beer, double dosing on your medication, like, what do you need a criminal defense attorney for? He said, well, my parents and I had been talking, and seeing as how I was, Samantha's ex-boyfriend, mind you, he was not even the last person that she had dated. He was just the ex-boyfriend. So I don't know why that has red flags for you and your family. Then my parents thought it was a good idea for me to go ahead and retain counsel. Why? The police had already interviewed you. Why months later would it be a good idea for you to retain counsel? That doesn't make any sense.
Sure
Or
doesn't.
not months later, I guess, from October to November. It's not months later, just like a couple weeks later. You had already, the very next day after the murder, you were interviewed by the police. If your parents really wanted you to have counsel, you would have had counsel before you even went in to go talk to the police on the first date. You wouldn't have, after you already spoke to the police, you wouldn't have then decided, oh, you know what? I need to retain criminal defense counsel. No, you were interviewed by the police. Then you went and told your parents you killed her because you felt bad and you felt guilty about it. And then your parents were like, damn, really, son? We're going to need to go on ahead and get you an attorney. And they never thought that you would be crazy enough to actually call the police yourself and tell the police that you did it, but you did, which is why when you called the police from the police station, they didn't need to ask you why you were calling them from the police station. They already knew.
So true.
Jeffrey Herbsman.
I probably will never get a case that happens like that.
I don't think anyone will ever get a case like happens like this ever in life again. This was a once in a lifetime set of circumstances that is wild. And we literally have a murderer walking amongst us and no one seems to care. Everyone is still harping on Michael Jackson Bolanos, which is crazy to me.
Yeah, that makes no sense. Like everything that came out in trial leaves no doubt that this was an innocent man. And you know who did it.
Like, I mean, how much easier can it get? The guy gave himself on a silver platter. Like, what?
Tell me, let's go to closing argument. I want to hear what the prosecutor argued in closing after these horrible witnesses and how you guys dealt with their closing argument and your closing argument and what you did in closing.
Sure. The prosecutor in closing argument, again, they focused on the fact that there was that those 2 specks of blood on Michael Jackson Bolanos' coat. That was they felt like that was their golden goose for this case. Her DNA was on him. That's the golden goose. They also focused on the fact that when Michael Jackson Bolanos was brought in for interrogation by Stephen Ford and Patrick Lane, that he kept saying, I never saw anyone that night. I never saw anyone. They're like, he's a liar. All he does is lie. Like he lied and he lied and he lied and he lied. That was essentially the prosecution's closing argument. And they were saying basically, like, don't let him have this lotto ticket to let him get out of this crime. Don't give him the winning lottery ticket. Like, you know that he did this. Like he took the life of Samantha Wall, blah, blah, blah. Honestly, I felt like their closing argument was pretty garbage. Like he tied it together with what he had, but again, his evidence was not strong from the beginning. From the beginning, it was not strong. When you don't have strong evidence, nothing that you say, no matter how eloquently you say it, will ever sound good. It's going to sound like trash because you didn't have anything to begin with, right? So that was their whole thing. And they were saying also, so Michael Jackson Bolanos' girlfriend at the time had been called to testify because she had testified that the coat was washed. Oh, which also leads, so they played a phone call between them of the coat being washed. They also played a phone call, mind you, at trial. I'm sorry, I'm digressing.
Oh, go ahead. You're good.
The judge actually allowed the prosecutor to play a phone call of Brian Brown and Jackson Bolanos at trial for the jury. Attorney-client privilege?
What?
Attorney-client privilege? The judge allowed the prosecutor to play a phone call between Jackson Bolanos and Brian Brown at trial for the jury. There was no such thing as attorney-client privilege. That just does not matter to this. That's how badly this prosecution wanted this.
I gotta ask you, what was said on that call?
Nothing was said on that call that was all that important, but the prosecutor wanted to piecemeal this call, okay? So after the second day of preliminary exam, when Brian Brown did his objection to bind over at preliminary exam, he put out the hypothetical of, and we already knew this was not a hypothetical. We knew this because Bolanos had told us that he had come across Samantha Wall outside. He had touched her. He realized she was not alive, and he got on because he didn't want to be a part of it. So Brian Brown proposed that theory in objection to bind over because the judge was like, well, how did he get the little bit of blood on him? And Brian Brown said, well, judge, if he's out and about and he's, doing these little petty crimes and he comes across the body and he leans down to check her to see if she's alive, that would be how a speck of blood got on him. And then he's like, oh, this has nothing to do with me. And he leaves. that would be why there's nothing more than a speck of blood on him. And the judge was like, that actually makes a lot of sense, because if he committed this murder, he would have a lot more blood on him. However, the judge still bound the case over, right? So afterwards, Jackson Bolanos calls Brian Brown on the phone and is talking to Brian Brown from the jail. And he's saying, bro, because the judge said, the judge had added, before he bound over, he had added to Brian Brown and said, well, Jackson Bolanos, being the petty thief that he is, he probably tried to run her pockets and see if she had anything. And then when he realized she didn't, then he got on. So Jackson Bolanos took offense to that. So he called Brian Brown after the preliminary and was like, why would that judge be trying to say I would run her pockets? Like, bro, I would never take nothing off of nobody. Like, I'm not that type of dude. Like, I wouldn't steal off of nobody. I would never take nothing from nobody. Like, I might take something from a car, but I'd never go in nobody's house. I would never take nothing from no actual person. I would never do nothing like that. Like, why would that judge say that? And Brian Brown was saying, the judge just has his own opinion on whatever happened. It doesn't matter. We already know that, you stumbled across her outside. You touched her. And that's how the whole point of the judge saying that was, that's how the little bit of blood got on you. There would have been a lot more blood if you would have killed her, blah, blah, blah. Ryan Elsey, the prosecutor, wanted to play that call because he was trying to say to the jury, Brian Brown fed this entire story to Michael Jackson Bolanos. Brian Brown told Michael Jackson Bolanos that this was going to be the defense, that you just came across the body and touched the body and then went away because you got scared. First of all, Jackson Bolanos never fed us that story. That is exactly what happened. And we know that's what happened because he even told Chad Osman that on the day that he was arrested and taken to DDC. Chad Osman testified to that, even though it took Chad Osman a long time to get to his memory on that. That's true. And that was the first thing Jackson Bolanos told me and told Brian Brown about this case. He did come across this woman. So that's not a lie. The prosecutor just wanted to play this little bitty part of the call, right? But as we know, the rules of evidence, the rule of completeness.
You get to let it all in.
The whole thing, right? We played that whole call. That call was a brilliant call. It was beautiful. It was almost a closing argument in and of itself because it's Jackson Bolanos talking about his innocence for a 16-minute phone call. He spends 16 minutes on the phone with Brian Brown talking about how innocent he is and how this whole system is trying to railroad him and how none of this actually makes any sense to him. And he's so confused as to what is going on and how he's fearful that people might actually buy the bullshit that the prosecution is trying to sell. It was a beautiful call, but anyway,
did he testify at trial?
He testified at trial. He took the stand. He did phenomenally. He told the truth. He got up there and he told the truth. He said, yes, I've lied in the past. And I lied during that interrogation, but I lied because they were telling me I went into somebody's home and I murdered somebody. And I know I did not go into anybody's home or murder anybody. So at that point, they had me on the defense where if they're telling me they have evidence of me going into someone's home and murdering them, I'm not willing to tell them I came across this woman outside and touched her and got on because I don't trust anything about what they're saying anymore. Because I know I didn't go inside anyone's home and murder them. So how are they telling me they have evidence of that? That automatically puts me on the defense. That does not make me want to be truthful to them. So yes, I lied to them through that interview because they didn't give me a reason to be truthful with them. That is so true. That is so believable. There's nothing about that that's unbelievable to me. If somebody's lying to you and you know they are bold-faced lying to you, you're not going to be truthful to them. What reason do you have? It does not behoove you or benefit you in any way to tell these people the truth when they are clearly out to get you because they're telling you bold-faced lies to your face.
Right.
So just crazy. But all in all, Brian did a phenomenal job of closing and in closing because there was another piece of evidence that the prosecution just ever so coincidentally did not enter into evidence. It was there was a bloody footprint that was found inside of Samantha Wall's house on a pillow next to the couch. One bloody footprint. It was a shoe print. I'm sorry, a shoe print. It was not Samantha Wall's because Samantha Wall, we know, was wearing flip-flops that night because her flip-flops were next to the couch and they were all bloody. And then the rest of the footsteps in the house were her footprints, the bloody footprints in the house. But there was one bloody shoe print that was on a pillow. The prosecutor never mentioned it at all during trial, not one time. Why? Because they had taken 3 pairs of shoes from Jackson Bolanos when they raided his house. They compared his shoes to that shoe print, And that shoe print was not even the same size as the shoes that he wears. So unless this guy just wore way bigger shoes to go commit a murder that night, which obviously he did not commit a murder, so he did not wear bigger shoes. None of that even makes any sense. That was not his shoe print. We, however, talked about that shoe print in closing argument and said, why is it that you guys have never seen evidence number or record number 36 or whatever it was called? And then we showed record number 36. Prosecutor, objection, judge, I need to approach. He approaches and goes, I can't even remember what his objection to this was. He tried to say that he's not sure that, because we said, because this shoe print does not match Jackson Bolanos' shoe print. That's why you never heard anything about it. This shoe print is the shoe print of whoever murdered Samantha Wall. And we know that it doesn't match Jackson Bolanos because we got the return on it. So objection. He tries to approach and say that we never got the return of the submission of that shoe print. We're like, yes, we did. Yes, we did. We have it in email. It's a part of our record log. I pulled it out. I was like, he's like, I need to check my email. You just used that as an opportunity to object to our closing argument because our closing argument was fire. It was so fire.
I would have went right back to, like, when that happens, I like to say, as I was saying.
Okay.
Kind of like letting the jury know the judge ruled in my favor.
Well, here's the thing. So because Ryan Elsey did that, right? The judge goes, well, because Ryan Elsey is then at his computer and he's acting like he's trying to look it up and try to find it and blah, 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 blah. And then he goes, Judge, I'm sorry, I can't find it right now. So the judge told Brian Brown to move on from that point, and that at lunch, Ryan Elsey would have an opportunity to find it. And then she would tell the jury if Ryan Elsey is correct, then she'll tell the jury that they have to forget whatever part about the shoe print that he talks about.
That's
we
so
go
wrong.
To lunch. Wrong as hell. We go to lunch and come back. And what does Ryan Elsey say? I'm sorry, Judge. Yeah, the defense was correct. That was actually submitted for testing, and we did get the results of that back, and that did not match Jackson Bolanos. So Brian didn't get the opportunity to say, as I was saying, because the judge instructed him to move on from that point to finish his close.
And she didn't clear it up for the defense, I'd imagine.
No, of course not. The judge was against Jackson Bolanos. She was against us as the defense the entire time, which is why all of these objections that we were making were getting overruled left and right. We were making valid, good objections. She was overruling them. She gave us a couple, maybe just to make us feel good or whatever, but no, the substantial ones, we were overruled.
I always say they like to give you a couple to, in case the case goes up on appeal, to make it look like they were fair and impartial.
Of course. And then at sentencing, she sentenced him.
Before we get to sentencing.
Oh, yeah.
After closing argument, obviously the jury deliberates. So I want to know what's going through your team's mind during the deliberation, and what happens once the verdict is read.
Okay, so I'm telling you, I always get nervous when the jury starts deliberating.
Same
I don't
here.
care how good I've done, how strong I know my case is. That's the point where my stomach just gets...
It's out of your hands. It's completely out of your control at that point.
Nothing you can do at that point. So I always get super, super, super nervous right then. We were for sure nervous. There was no other way to be. It was incredibly nerve-wracking. And like you said earlier, your nerves are 100 times higher when you know without a shadow of a doubt that your client is innocent of everything he's been charged with. There is not one single thing they charged him with that he was guilty of. And so it was so nerve-wracking. And then the jury kept coming back and saying they did not have a consensus. They did not have a unanimous, they kept trying to get a hung jury on everything. They were like, we can't decide on any of these counts. The judge kept sending them back. She sent them back like 4 or 5 times. She kept sending them back. It was all over the news that the jury is still out. The jury keeps coming back and saying they are not unanimous. And the judge kept sending them back. And she told them on the final time, okay, if you guys come back one more time, okay, then, well, she told us, she said, if they come back one more time, then I will declare this a mistrial. But then they finally came back. I mean, we were Everybody was nervous. Brian was nervous. Bolanos was so nervous. I mean, he was every day I would go in there and I would sit in, like, he was in the one cell and I would prop myself up on the ledge and I would bring my cell phone and I would just play Netflix on my cell phone and hold it up to the glass. So we would just sit there and watch Netflix like videos and stuff, just something to keep his mind off of it so that he wasn't just sitting there constantly thinking about it all the time. Just anything to distract him, because that had to have been the hardest weight of his life, to wait for that verdict. I can't even imagine what he was feeling. I know what I was feeling. I was tremendously nervous. My nerves were through the roof. I was nervous, but I knew that if the jury got this wrong, that they had to have been the stupidest people in the world. If they were to have convicted on first degree murder, they would have had to be the dumbest people in the world. I was like, it's not possible for them to do this. Like that, they can't.
What was the verdict?
So the verdict was first degree murder with the underlying second. He was found not guilty. They found him not guilty of both first and second degree murder. Home invasion, home invasion had the predicate theory of assault. They said that he went into the house and then he assaulted her, which ties into that first degree. They had a hung jury on that. Then they said, and I will actually tell you the exact numbers because I wrote down the numbers for this and I have a photograph of it because I was recently talking about it with his appellate attorney. So home invasion was 8 not guilty, 4 guilty. Felony murder was 9 not guilty, 3 guilty. And lying to the police regarding an investigation of larcenies from motor vehicles, they found him guilty, which I don't understand how they found guilty on that, because there was never an investigation of larcenies from a motor vehicle. That investigation never occurred. From the very beginning of this entire investigation, it was the investigation of the murder of Samantha Wall. There was never an officer who said, yes, I was in charge of investigating larcenies from motor vehicles. There was never a civilian who took the stand and said, yeah, items were stolen from my car on such and such night. That never happened. So I don't know how the jury convicted him of lying to police officers regarding an investigation of larcenies from motor vehicles. That investigation never took place. You can't lie about something that didn't ever happen.
Right. How much time did the judge give him?
The judge gave him 18 months to 15 years.
For breaking in cars, allegedly.
No, for lying to the police regarding larcenies, regarding an investigation of larcenies from a motor vehicle. Lying to the police, basically. She gave him 18 months to 15 years.
So that would make him eligible for parole at some point, correct?
His parole, this is the crazy part. It's crazy we're doing this today. His earliest release date was supposed to be tomorrow, June 9th. He got flopped.
What do you mean he got flopped?
He is not coming home. His parole flopped him. Parole flopped him and said that he is a menace to society and a threat to public safety. They are not reassured that he will not be a menace to society or a threat to public safety, and therefore he needs to spend more time incarcerated. They flopped his parole.
Do you think they're going to try to keep him the entire 15 years?
I think they would have a very difficult time doing so. I really hope that is not what they intend on doing. I think he has a very strong possibility to come back on parole again the next go around, because another reason that he was flopped is, I don't know if you guys have a thing called, I know you probably have an equivalent of it, but what we call ours is a PSI, our pre-sentence investigation report, which is, the write-up and the previous history, blah, blah, blah. Right. So in his PSI, the narrative of the PSI, it only talks about the investigation of the murder of Samantha Wall. Nowhere in that does it talk about the lying to a police officer regarding an investigation of larcenies from motor vehicles. The reason it can't talk about that is because that never happened. There was never an investigation. So the PSI doesn't talk about that at all. The PSI only talks about the murder of Samantha Wall. So the Michigan Parole Board, when he was up for parole and had his parole interview, they looked at his PSI and they gave him points against his parole, saying that his conviction includes death. First of all, he was convicted of lying to the police about an investigation of larcenies into motor vehicles. That has nothing to do with death at all. And he was acquitted of murder. So even otherwise, under any other circumstance, none of this includes death because he was found not guilty of murder. So I'm not sure. This is all very.
Sounds like there's some political strings being pulled. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yeah, that's exactly what it sounds like to me. It sounds like railroading. It sounds like political strings being pulled. It sounds like people because again, Samantha Wall was affiliated with all of these people. So yeah, it sounds to me like there's a lot of something going on backdoor that no one's talking about.
How long does he have to sit before he can go up for parole again?
So it will be he got a 12-month flop. So he's up for parole June 9th of 2026. I forgot what year we were in for a second. 2026.
Is there anything else going on in the case? Appeals or post-conviction relief?
Yes. So I had filed a motion because we had asked that everything regarding Samantha Wall's murder be stricken from the PSI. We asked for that at sentencing. The judge denied us that, and she moved him forward with his PSI. Now he's been flopped. I filed a motion for post-conviction relief after the fact, asking that the PSI be changed to only reflect the charge that he has been convicted of. The judge denied it without even giving me a hearing. She just straight up denied it. So Wayne County Prosecutor's Office wants to appeal. There is a U.S. Supreme Court case, which is the Yeager case, which precludes reprosecution for the hung counts, because that would be double jeopardy. Reason being is because he can't be found. He cannot be retried for felony murder because he was acquitted of murder 1 and 2, which means murder didn't occur. He did not commit a murder, so you can't retry him for felony murder because that's double jeopardy. He was acquitted of murder. Can't retry him for a murder. Okay, but under home invasion, again, they had the choice to pick the predicate theory. And there's 2 predicate theories for home invasion, as you know. One is larceny and one is assault. They chose assault. Well, if he was acquitted of second-degree murder, then in order to assault someone, the way that Samantha Wall died is by stabbing, which is an assault. They've already said that he did not commit first or second-degree murder, which means you're also precluded from retrying him on home invasion under Yeager, because that's double jeopardy. Your predicate theory is assault. You can't retry on him. You can't retry him. He didn't assault her because he didn't murder her. And the only way she died was by stabbing. So that's an assault. So you can't retry him. But they're trying anyways. They want the U.S. Supreme Court to overturn themselves on Yeager and find it to be bad law. And therefore they want him retried on felony murder and home invasion. So they have filed, they're appealing, and their intent, which they made clear at sentencing, is they intend to appeal this all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court.
That is terrible.
Unbelievable that they are so gung-ho about this when there is a murderer who admitted to the murder, who's out here just walking around, living his best life, while Michael Jackson Bolanos is wrongfully incarcerated right now to this day. Unbelievable. Sick.
What did this case teach you?
Oh my gosh. It made me oh my gosh. This case taught me so much, honestly, and probably more than I can even put into words. Like it almost gave me a sense of paranoia because even in other cases that I have done before, I have seen prosecutors and police officers do some really dirty things and use some really dirty tactics to try to get what they want, but never to this level. I have never in my life seen it to this level before. This case taught me to literally never stop fighting. It doesn't matter. You can never stop fighting. I will never stop fighting for Michael Jackson Bolanos. I will never stop telling people how innocent he is. And I don't care where this case goes. Like, I do care because I don't want him incarcerated, because I think that is just insanely wrong to do to somebody. But I mean, this case taught me that the war is never over. It is never over until a person is not only released from incarceration, but also never has to live under the fear of being retried for something like this when it is so evidently and abundantly clear they did not do it. This is literally harassment on his life. Like this is the worst type of fear and trauma for someone to have to live under and to live through. Like right now, he's in prison right now, and that is trauma, and that's trauma based. That's absolutely traumatic that he's in prison and should not be there. And even when he gets out, if they continue to keep trying to move forward with this, that's even adding to the trauma that someone has to live with the fear that this is going to continuously happen to them. That's crazy. I just can't even express enough the, oh my God. And it's also taught me a million other things. Honestly, I could go on and on about the things that it's taught me, but this case was sad and sick from its very core. And really, there should be justice for Samantha Wall. I really do believe there should be. Somebody did murder Samantha Wall. It was not Michael Jackson Bolanos, but there does need to be justice for Samantha Wall. So they need to go and get the person that actually murdered her, and he needs to stand trial. He or she, although I believe it is a he, because I do believe that it is Jeffrey Herbsman, the person who admitted to it. But for the sake of, I guess, let's just keep an open mind, whoever it is, and it's obviously not Michael Jackson Bolanos, I do believe that there does need to be justice for Samantha Wall, and they do need to get the right person and prosecute the right person. And all the fervor and all the ambition that they had for Michael Jackson Bolanos, I want to see them come with that same hellfire for the actual person who killed her. I want to see them put all of that same manpower and hours and investigation and all of that into the actual person who killed her. That's what I want to see.
What should the public take away from this case?
You know, the public should take away from this case that this case to me is a prime example of the government playing in our face. They are showing us their power, and they're doing it directly in our face, and they're hoping that we're stupid enough to just go along with it. People should always pay attention to things like this that happen. We always hear about, well, the public always hears about certain things that happen during the course of a trial, but they never really understand it fully and entirely unless they're sitting in that courtroom every day and watching things unfold from the very beginning. But really, you know, we see all the time that public coming together and being in arms together and raising our voices against injustice does make a change. It does make a change because politicians and all of these people that head like these prison systems and judges and prosecutors and, you know, DAs and stuff like that, they get nervous when the public is up in arms, and it is high priority for the public to be talking about injustice because all of these people care deeply about their reputations. They do. They care deeply about it. And if they know that the entire public is against this and we see them playing in our face like this and we are not here for it and we're going to keep talking about it and we're going to make it a big deal, then somebody in a higher up place of power will pay attention and they will get the attention of all of these people, and that will scare them enough to get them to do the right thing. And that
was my next question. What can the public do to support the fight for Michael Jackson Bolanos' freedom?
Talk about it. They have to talk about it. They have to share it. They have to reach out to Governor Whitmer here in Michigan. She has the ability to commute or to pardon Michael Jackson Bolanos. They need to reach out to the Wayne County Prosecutor's Office. They need to let it be known that Kim Worthy does not need to try to come after Michael Jackson Bolanos any further. They need to reach out to the Attorney General. They need to reach here in Michigan. Like, coming together and showing that there is power in numbers is the most important thing for us to do as a community. We need to let the government know not only can you not get away with injustice, but you also cannot just flaunt that in our face and hold it right there in front of us and play like we're dumb enough to just go along with it. Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
That's great. So I really enjoyed this. I knew I would when we did our little discovery call and you gave me an intro on the case and what we're going to talk about. I Googled it like most people do. And I was like, wow, this is going to be really interesting. It's a terrible miscarriage of justice, but it was truly interesting to hear Michael Jackson Bolanos' story, and hopefully something can and will be done to get this innocent man out of prison relatively soon.
I hope so.
For you, if somebody needs to find you or needs your services, how do they connect with you?
They can find me anywhere. I have Facebook, I have Instagram, I have a website that I'm working on. It's, I've had issues with the website, but whatever. My Detroit Lawyer. You can find me everywhere as My Detroit Lawyer. TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. My number is listed everywhere on all of my social media platforms. That is the easiest way to contact me. But My Detroit Lawyer, My Detroit Lawyer, My Detroit Lawyer. You can find it everywhere.
Great. I will never forget that.
I really want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to utilize your platform to advocate on behalf of Michael Jackson Bolanos and tell this story, because I do think it is so, so, so important. And again, like I said, I will never stop fighting for this man and fighting for his freedom and fighting for his rights. And I really, really, truly thank you for giving me the opportunity to utilize your platform and for you to take an interest in his case and ask me the questions that you've asked and allow me to just speak freely about this case. So thank you so much.
Thank you for coming on. Typically at the end of each episode, I get on here and I tell you guys that is the sound of justice. You've heard it right here on the Iron Gavel. In the case of Michael Jackson Bolanos, I cannot say that. Even though this man was found not guilty of first-degree, second-degree felony murder, and that jury hung on the home invasion charge, the judge still gave him 18 months to 15 years for lying to the police, and they continue to hold this man in prison, even blocking his attempts to be let out on parole. This is a live, active case that is ongoing. It may end up at the U.S. Supreme Court, but I want you guys to pay close attention. This is when politics influence the justice system and an innocent man is sitting in prison, rotting. This cannot be left to stand. We must get the word out. We must let everybody who cares know that we know what they have done and what they are doing to this man is not acceptable, not in this country.
Thank you for watching the Iron Gavel with Christopher Washington. Please like and subscribe to stay up to date.